Alvin Jones, a producer with Book TV. For the past 2 weeks, we've been airing several Book TV programs in prime time. And tonight, we're going to show you something a little different. As you know, In Depth is our monthly 3-hour live call-in program. On the first Sunday of each month, we invite one author to discuss their entire body of work and to take your calls. Well, In Depth also includes a visit with the author to see where and how they write their books. This evening, we'll be showing you several authors and the visits we made to their homes and offices. On a snowy day in January this year, we visited historian Nell Irvin Painter at her home in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. She is the author of 6 books, including Creating Black Americans, Sojourner Truth, A Life, a Symbol. She was also an American history professor at Princeton for 16 years before retiring in 2005.
I wish I could say that I got up early and I came to my computer and I put myself to work and I ate properly and I worked for several hours and had a full day's work. I kind of get up and I have tea and I sit in front of the window and maybe I look at the New York Times on the web, or if Glenn has gone to town to get it, look at that. Think about what I'm going to do. Go down to the treadmill, have some breakfast, and meander over to the computer. And then I sort of pick up steam as the day goes by. So I start sort of slowly. By afternoon, I'm really rolling. And then in the evening, I sort of have to tear myself away because I'm falling asleep or I'm not working very productively. So I would not recommend my way of working to others. My method for writing depends on what I'm writing. So if I'm writing something short, like an 800-word letter to my colleagues in the Organization of American Historians, I'll start with a few key ideas. I'll open a document on my computer and then think around those ideas, moving them around, pulling them together. Perhaps if I have messages from some people who have ideas they want me to include, I'll go back to the emails and then pull those back. So with something short, I can play with it right here on the computer. With something longer, like the book I'm working on, and I'm at 3 different stages of this book, which is driving me a little crazy. I have books here, which I bring back from New Jersey. I've taken a lot of books out of the library at SUNY Plattsburgh, which is up the road from here. And I'll sit in the other room, usually if it's daytime, in front of the big window where the view is beautiful. And there's also a nice little space heater. Or if it's evening, I'll make a fire and stretch out on the couch and read. So I'll read and then make a kind of personal index on another sheet of paper. Or if I own the book, I'll put it in the back I'll just write it in the back of the book. And then make a big pile of those books, perhaps photocopying if I need, but certainly looking back at my own indexes, and then putting together ideas to fit into what I'm trying to do. What I'm doing here, though, is not that kind of work. This is revision of revision, and so it's really almost word by word, making sure that I have the right word, making sure that the narrative flows from one paragraph to another. So it's pretty logocentric in the sense of not spreading out and doing research, but kind of working paragraph by paragraph and sentence by sentence. I'm a very academic writer. I'm a historian, so everything I say needs to come out of the archives or out of somebody's scholarship. So I can't sort of walk in the woods and make up the things I want to write. However, I can walk in the woods and ask myself questions and ask questions of my sources. And that's what makes my book, makes it sound like me and not like all the other people I draw on. So a lot of the work goes on in this room or in this house. In fact, it all goes on in this room and in this house in the winter as we have here, because you don't want to spend a lot of time outside when it's really cool or cold. But in other parts of the year, I can work out on the screen porch, I can go down by the river, sometimes kayaking helps. So it's a series of different ways, different methodologies.
The scenery was very beautiful on the way here. I didn't see very many houses, a lot of mountains. It's very
Yes.
snowy right now.
Yes.
Why are you here?
We are here because working here, even though we have fast internet, and we have phone, and we have fax, and we have Xerox, we have all the modern conveniences, it's still a distance from home in New Jersey. So it feels as though we have more concentration when we're here. I don't know if that's really the case, but that certainly is the way it feels. I have always composed on the keyboard. I mean, always from the time I wrote my dissertation. I wrote my dissertation in the library at Radcliffe. I had a big Selectric typewriter, and I composed on the typewriter. And then I would cut the pages up. I would first write on yellow paper, and then I would make changes manually, and then almost literally cut and paste. It was cut and tape. And then as it got a little more polished, then I'd move over to white paper, and there would be this middling time in which there would be strips of yellow, and then there'd be white, and then there would be more and more white, and scratching out of that, and so forth. I have always done a lot of revising. With the computer, my first computer book was Standing in Armageddon in New York City in the 80s, mid-80s. And I thought that was wonderful because then I could revise infinitely. And at first I thought, well, I'll never do this because retyping was a way of revising. And I knew I wouldn't have to do all that retyping. But it turned out to be much, much better. And so I still do more and more revising. I still compose on the keyboard. Now I make a new document every day. So each day I will actually entitle the document what it's called, like Chapter 3, Blumenbach, and then put the date on it. So when it's in my computer, just on the list of documents, I can see which one is the new one and which is the old one. So these were the pages I was working on, and the handwriting here is my editor, Ed Barber, wonderful gentleman editor who knows what he's doing. So I'm looking at material that I struggled over when we were in Germany in 2001, and some of this research I actually did in German. My German isn't all that great, but I discovered a man I had never heard of named Christoph Meiners, who was a crazy guy, and so I put in a page and a half on Christoph Meiners, and my editor says, a reader may well get lost in this internecine academic struggle. And he suggests that it go. So I wasn't ready to throw the whole thing out. It may come to that later on. But right now I took out several of these sentences and then saved some of the others. Maybe the next step will be putting some of it in notes, and then maybe I can throw out the notes later. But it's hard to throw away material that was so hard won. And over here, this is actually the chapter that I'm working on. This is Move Elsewhere in Chapter 3. This is material on a man named Banks, who was very important in Blumenbach's world. But again, as my editor points out, it may not be all that important for my book. So I've put him over on the side here. So that's part of what I was doing. Another part of what I was doing was working with a thesaurus. Now, I am not too proud to use the thesaurus in Word, which I do. In fact, here it is. And sometimes that can be very, very useful to find another word. But very often, the thesaurus in Word, in the software, is too rudimentary to get to the nuances I need. So I was fiddling with a word for submissive or submission or abjection, and I ended up, I've forgotten what I ended up with, but I ended up with a word, I think subjection, that I found in Roget's rather than in Word. The great thing about Word is that it has all the parts of speech, and it has lots of words for you to choose from. The great thing about Roget, I hope I said that right, and you can work around the pages around where you were looking for and find other meanings and other nuances, even other parts of speech that can help clarify your thought. And so that's why I very often use Roget's bound thesaurus in addition to the thesaurus on my computer.
If your editor is working this closely with you, how does the editor get the what you're working on? What form?
Yeah. My editor gets it on, well, earlier I sent him a CD because I sent him 13 chapters. But right now I'm working on 3 chapters, and I'll probably just email them to him. And he can print them out in New York and work on it. And then he will, since he writes on it, he will send me back, oh, hello, Ro. This is Ro, who is a very friendly cat. Ro speaks German, actually, and likes to write. So he will send me back hard copy, and then I will work on that on computer and then send him email, or if I have a lot of stuff, or if I have a lot of images that take up a lot of space, I will send him a CD. What I have done, this book is not nearly as image heavy as the book that I published in 2005-2006, which had like 150 images. But even though actually some of the chapters here don't even have images, and the ones that have image may have just 1 or 2 or 3, but that many can make for an awfully big file in email. So I've separated the images from the text, and so I can send him the text through email, and if he needs to see the images again, then I can send him a CD.
Do you keep your own library, a large one, or do you go to public libraries? What's your philosophy on that?
Mostly I use the Princeton University Library, which walks on water. I couldn't do this book with, thank you, Princeton University Library, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's not just the books. So the Princeton University Library has a service in which I can send them a citation of a chapter of a book or an article, and they will email it to me. And that has been a lifesaver. That is the reason I can work here. I should say also that the World Wide Web is very, very helpful. So one of my editor's concerns was that I would identify figures, and this is a very figure-centered story so that readers won't get bogged down in just academic stuff. So there are a lot of little biographies in it. And I got very focused on getting all the information I could and knowing all that was really important about these figures. And my editor will say, well, sometimes we just need a phrase to give the reader a sense of who this person is when they first appear. So one of my editorial jobs is to go back and very often just go to the World Wide Web and find out what the kind of ID for a figure I wrote a lot about. So, for instance, Ralph Waldo Emerson plays a very big part in my book. And I know all about Ralph Waldo Emerson now, but my reader is going to want to know in the beginning that Ralph Waldo Emerson was the most important 19th century writer in the United States.
Your desk has one picture on it.
Yeah.
And it's Freud.
Yes.
Why is that?
It's more than Freud.
And yeah, I don't recognize the other.
This is a piece by an artist named Ellen Gallagher, and the picture is Freud sketching, And as far as I know, Freud didn't sketch. Freud was very interested in art, but I don't know that he sketched. But the woman in the picture is the actual artist, Ellen Gallagher, but she is wearing the outfit of an odalisque. The odalisque is the white slave figure who was so important in 19th and 20th century Western art, and particularly for Matisse. So she is putting herself in a kind of Matisse situation and then having Freud sketch her. I think it's a wonderful image. I am actually an art student, so this reminds me that I have another life and that it can be academic, art can be academic and also be rewarding and interesting. On the wall is the Kara Walker cover from the New Yorker. And I admire Kara Walker's work very much. She's an excellent artist. Technically, she's brilliant. I wouldn't like to live in her head, but I think that she really understands a lot of what was going on in 19th century American history. So that is also there to remind me about history and art.
There's another one.
This pastel is by a friend of mine who lives in Paris and who reminds me that we are going to paint together. So her name is Jeannette de Mystère. And her piece, actually, the center part you can see are nudes in the classical way of Western painting. But around the edges are parts of the life and work of Elsie Lasker-Schuller, who was a German Jewish poet. And Jeannette has actually translated her poetry. And so this is some of the some images related to the Holocaust that are around the edges.
So you have gone to art school.
Yes.
And could you explain all of that to us and then show us some of your work?
I can't explain it all to you because we'd be here forever, but I am a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts student at the Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers. And I am trying to balance 2 or 3 different lives at the same time. And since my main work now is finishing The History of White People, the book that I'm working on now, I have to keep my art within these tiny little corners. So this fall I actually snuck up to SUNY State, to Plattsburgh State at SUNY in Plattsburgh, and I took one class, a printmaking class. So I did several pieces. They're all assignments. People ask me, what kind of work do I do when I say I do assignments? And I will be doing assignments for a little bit longer. Actually, you know, I feel like a grandchild sometimes with art because people say, well, let me see your work. And I say, here's my work. And they say, oh, that's so nice. And I feel like, I know this is student work. I'm a student, this is student work. So people are really very generous about saying how sweet and nice, and I have to hold myself back from bringing it all out and saying, look, look, I did this, I did this, I did this. So here's just a little teeny bit. This one is called Vitruvian Man Leonardo, Vitruvian Man Bush. And the assignment was before and after in a causal relationship. And it's a lino print on 2 different pieces. So this one is, it's not very good. Conceptually, the teacher found it a little unsubtle, but it's about bodily whole, according to Leonardo. Vitruvius was the artist who thought about putting the figure out like that. And so Leonardo made his Vitruvian Man, very familiar scene. So I adapted that to our times and showed a person who has lost limbs and had a lot of of surgical intervention as part of the body of our time. So this was earlier on in the semester. This one is an aquatint, which was a lot of work. This one was about a childhood memory. The assignment was childhood memory. So the memory I went back to was horseback riding with my father. My parents are still alive. They're 90 years old. My father is not well. So this was going back to a time when probably neither of us could foresee where we would be in half the time we've reached. I asked my parents if they thought they'd live to be 90, and they were both kind of surprised. This is the last assignment, which is a tarot card, and so I called the piece Tarot. And I did it in 2 different color schemes, and I brought them both out because I did so much work trying to get the colors right. The plates on this, and this is soft ground, so the technique here is soft ground etching, and then the rest is etching the little bit of dry point.
What's soft ground etching?
Soft ground etching is where you treat your plate with the soft film, a soft ground, and then you sort of cook it for a while. It gets really soft and malleable. And then you put something that has a texture on it, like a piece of cloth, and you run that through the press, and then you end up with a texture. So the texture here, and this was very fine, so it doesn't come out so well, is very different from the texture here in the aquatint. So, but for me, the great challenge here was not so much in getting the texture. I mean, I did have to work very hard on doing that because there's several steps, and you have to do the steps right in the right order. But the zinc plate interacted with the ink. And so the color scheme that I had set up in my head was nothing like the color scheme that came out when I actually printed. So I ended up with 2 sets of colors, and they're both considered part of the same edition. And I don't know which one I like better, but I do like the way the colors came out. But for me, the printmaking was so satisfactory because it was something I didn't know how to do before. And I worked very hard at it, and in my grandchild little way, I came out with a few pieces that I guess I don't mind showing you.
In October of last year, we visited author David Horowitz at his home in Camarillo, California. He is the author of several books, including Radical Son, The Professors, the 101 Most Dangerous Academics in America, and Indoctrination U, The Left's War Against Academic Freedom.
A typical working day for me is getting up maybe 5 or 6 in the morning. I'm a morning person, obviously, and I think most clearly then. And getting into this chair with my laptop and my 2 little dogs. This is Jake, and this is Lucy. And typing until sunset, probably. I have, in addition to writing, I have to orchestrate an organization. So some of my time is spent with emails and on the phone. But pretty much I spend the whole day writing. Oh, and I'll take the dogs for a walk or go out and visit the horse in the corral. This is Alvin. This is why I bought this place, for Alvin. Yeah. He's busy eating there. My organization it's called the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And it's basically to defend free societies against the attacks that have been launched against them since they were first founded at the end of the 18th century. Freedom is regarded by many as a threat. And the forces beginning with the left in the French Revolution through the totalitarian forces, which, of course, communism derives from the French Revolution. The Bolsheviks saw themselves as the Jacobins. And now, of course, we have the Islamo-fascist threat. We had the threat from the Nazis. All these totalitarian ideologies find freedom intolerable. And actually, if you look up on the shelf there, I have a lot of books by Dostoevsky, who saw this early and wrote what is perhaps the greatest 10 pages on the subject of this battle of the 20th and now the 21st century, called The Grand Inquisitors. This is my communism shelf, books on communism. This is kind of on the left in academia. And this little book this is a left-wing book, but it's of my commie camp that I went to. This was a camp run by the Communist Party, Wochica, which was not an Indian name. It meant Workers' Children's Camp, which I'm kind of featured in as the notorious camp alumni. This is a book about my radical mentor, Ralph Miliband, who's no longer with us, but his sons are now the foreign minister in Britain and the chief of staff for the prime minister. Ralph stopped speaking to me when I decided that the left was deluded. This is a front page of the Chronicle of Higher Education, which I guess is a tribute to my efforts to reform higher education and to return it really to liberal principles. Liberal in meaning true to the roots of liberty, where students get a chance to see both sides of a question and they don't sit in a classroom modeled on authoritarian societies where they're told what to think. My campaign has been incredibly misrepresented by the left. Even this headline, Pushing Politics from Left to Right, the campaign itself is viewpoint neutral. It just, if there's a controversial issue, let's hear both sides. Freedom is very difficult for most people. The left has entrenched itself in an institution where there's no bottom line. As the university, if you're not in the hard sciences where ideas are tested by experiment, there's no penalty for bad ideas. So the university is a fount of really bad ideas, tremendous ignorance, which goes under the guise of progressive education. The lessons of communism have not been learned. And in fact, the communist doctrines, certainly the communist analysis of capitalism is the analysis that you would get in any university. I don't care if it's Harvard or Yale or Berkeley or the University of Arizona. That's what you're going to get. You will learn that corporations are evil, that people are oppressed, and so forth. That the ruling class or the neoliberal order, which is international capitalism, is the greatest menace on earth. That's what you're going to learn if you go to a university these days. Not every professor spouts this kind of nonsense, but there, in women's studies, and black studies, and peace studies, and global studies courses, that is the doctrine.
Our in-depth guest for this past February was historian David Levering Lewis. He is the author of 2 biographies of W.E.B. Du Bois. Each one won the Pulitzer Prize for biography. David Levering Lewis is currently a history professor at New York University. We visited him at his home in Rhinebeck, New York.
door to door from my apartment in Upper Manhattan here, 92 odometer miles. I can make it in an hour and 40 minutes. I spend my weekends here, and indeed during semester breaks and interruptions as much time as I can and my wife can. We came here about 5 years ago. We've been careful not to invite too many of our friends up. We find that many people take or bring Manhattan with them, and that seems to me to be counter to the whole point. And so we're rather misanthropic. We're headed for the writing cockpit. This is a marvelous typewriter, the computer. For me, that's its real advantage. All the other things you can do with it are either too complicated for me or not of great interest. To be able to move paragraphs around and strike your mistakes without a trace is just a godsend. I try to get up no later than 7:30. I'm not an early riser. Never have been. In the Army, I got into trouble because I had trouble getting up for reveille. But once I'm up, I'm focused. Here, it's off to the local deli for the Times and the Wall Street Journal, and they mostly always arrive. Bring it here. Either I make breakfast, or my wife does, or we collaborate. And I read the papers. I'm finished by 9, I'd say. And then into the study, and it takes me, about 10 minutes to sort of fumble around and remember where I left off, and what I will not have remembered in my sleep, as I often go to bed and I say, well, I'm not going to forget this. I wrote to myself. But 9:30, 10, I'm writing. And I write until about 2. And then we have a wonderful park here about 2 miles away, Wilcox Park, and it's just wonderful for walking. But it's too far not to have to take the car. But I often do drive over, and we walk together for about half an hour. But if the weather's inclement, or if I decide not to take a walk, then I do the treadmill, half hour of that. I take the car after the walk and speed into Red Hook, the village of Red Hook, and there's a very handy restaurant there, and have something light, maybe a salad, back, so that by 2:30 or 3 o'clock I'm again writing. And that will go on until about 6 or 6:30. Sometimes I press the envelope until about 7, but not beyond that, because I don't miss ever, if I can avoid doing so, the Lehrer show at 7, and I get the depressing news of the day. I have an old-fashioned way of writing. It's certainly not very efficient, but for me it works quite well. And that is, I make notes in longhand in notebooks like this of everything I read. Here are, in fact, the notebooks. Now, one is missing. Who knows where it is? But there should be 5 notebooks for the book that has just appeared, the God's Crucible, Islam and the Making of Europe, 570 to 1215. I see this is Richard Fletcher's book, The Quest for El Cid, which was obviously useful, writing a book about Al-Andalus. And what I do is take these notes in handwriting that is still legible. I don't know what I'll do for the next book because my handwriting has deteriorated rather speedily lately, but I can make this out. And after I've taken notes, I come back and I, in very colored pens, then itemize what I think is really quite important here, so that I can, just when I open a book, say, okay, what's this about? It rejects the 11th century thesis. And what would that be about? Well, it seems that there's a debate amongst literary scholars about some aspect of the chanson de Roland. And that would be very important, I suppose. So there we go. Here is Itzhak Ber's History of the Jews in Christian Spain. And once again, in meticulous note-taking, with a system here that this notebook, which is number 1, and each page is numbered. And so as I write, I put brackets in, and this would be then notebook, it would be just 1/55, and then it would be, if I needed to keep, it would be 56. And so all of that is bracketed in the chapter. And then when it comes time to make sense of all this, get the endnotes up and translated, I would simply go back and cite Bernard Lewis, the Middle East, and the particular document of relevance would have been on page 55, and I guess it would be, say, right there, page 43 of Lewis. And I've always done that. This is the 9th book, and I've used this system. And when I am in the presence of people who have their laptops plugged into, say, the Wertheim room circuitry and are just typing away, I'm envious, but I can't replicate what they do. Ajib, okay. So why don't I? In addition to those notebooks, these are the other things that are generated. As I write a chapter, I go back through everything, and then I say, okay, how's this chapter going to unfold? And I give myself a kind of chronology, as you can see, and some salient quotes that highlight the issue that is being written about. Let's see, here's something about Ibn Hazm. And that's interesting because the New York Times review of the book was both inattentive and ulterior and pretty well inaccurate, I thought. And in that review by Eric Ormsby, he said, "Oh, he's got it completely wrong about how to render the significance of a book called The Dove's Necklace, the Tok al-Hamama by Ibn Hazm." And I just see here that I say a devout partisan. Well, let's see. Well, I'm not so much talking about the book. I'm just noting that, of course, Ibn Hazm is famous for having written this, what would it be, kind of primer for lovemaking in the 10th century.
Do you have red, blue, green?
Mm-hmm.
What do those codes mean to you?
Just variety, that's all. If it were all in black or all in blue. But this gives a kind of visual relief as I read. And then I'll probably have in the back of my mind, okay, that's light blue, what I'm looking for. And I'll say, okay, and now the red, that's got to be really significant, hot button stuff. You know, it is eccentric, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but it does work for me. But I do find that by taking notes in hand, perhaps it's a bit mystical, but one is really processing the information through the frontal lobe in a way that you don't do if you smartly have note cards. You're going to come back to them, or it's all been nicely put on the laptop. I just find that writing this stuff out, you are in fact taking what they've said and you are repeating it to yourself with your left-hand cursive, and that is useful. When writer's block comes along, and that happens with fair frequency, especially during the early stages of writing a book or a major piece, I put a little classical music on the bows and extract this baton, and then I conduct. It's a lovely piece. It's fabricated by the oldest fabricant of baton in Germany, Rechema und Bruch, and I conduct until either it's clear that that day is a non-starter, or I conduct myself out of the blockage into a good paragraph.
The first Sunday of every month is in-depth, 3 hours, one author. Here are David Levering Lewis's books. This, of course, is the two-part W.E.B. Du Bois biography. He won a Pulitzer for both of these. This one came out in 1994. This one came out in 2000, 2 Pulitzer Prizes for those. When Harlem Was in Vogue, The Race to Fashoda, Colonialism and African Resistance. King, a biography, came out in 1970. The Portable Harlem Renaissance Reader. It's edited by David Levering Lewis, and as is this one, the W.E.B. Du Bois Reader. Prisoners of Honor, The Dreyfus Affair, which we will talk about in our last hour. And his newest book, just out, last couple weeks, beginning the book tour, God's Crucible is the name of that book. Here's a little bit more of our visit to David Levering Lewis's home.
These books over here, you mentioned before that these were, this is what you used for this recent book.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. What's not in the library at Bobst New York Public or at the New York Public Library in the Judaica or Orientalia is here in the form of monographs.
And are these books that you purchased, or are
Yes, they are, from pretty much my research budget, or from the advance to do the book. For example, this is just such a remarkable work. This is the history of the Mohammedan dynasties in Spain by Ahmed ibn Mohammed al-Makari, and translated by Pascual de Gallangos in the 19th century. But this was written in the 17th century and written in Arabic and painstakingly translated. And so it is invaluable for the Umayyad history of Al-Andalus, and then for the period after the overthrow of the Caliphate in 1031 when Al-Andalus sort of separated into various city-states, Sevilla, Badajoz, Toledo, Granada, Almeria, and so on. And this is a record in almost real time of that history.
Using that book as an example, how did you use it? How much of it did you read, and did you take notes into your notebooks for that?
In this case, actually, you'll find marginalia in the book, the volumes themselves. I used it quite extensively, but the citation, it's ample. It's amply cited. But so much of it was the conversations recreated, supposed conversations of the dramatis personae. And one is a little skeptical that those conversations actually took place as given. And so I might just take a bit, but the note would indicate that it probably represents an event or a decision, but that the actual conversation has been, to some extent, recreated.
Now that you have this collection of books for your last project, what will happen to these?
Well, my wife would ask that question. She would say, where do these books go? From my perspective, they go in, they will stay, and the next library for the next book will probably have to have a bookcase built over there. I'm loath to take leave of books, and I have probably about 5,000 between here, Manhattan, and my office at NYU. At some point, when senescence or other things take me away from writing books, then I'll be less proprietary about them and be willing to winnow the collections. But for the present, they are such a part of me that the idea of saying goodbye to them would just be extremely painful.
Earlier you showed me a drawing on the wall here.
This is this ran in the New York Review of Books, a review of volume 2 of Du Bois, and it was an illustration done by David Levine. It is just wonderful, as illustrations by David Levine are, in that they evoke the personality to perfection, unfailingly. And this is Du Bois in the flesh, and I was successful in persuading David to allow me to purchase it, and it's a treasured work.
These books that you have here, is there any significance to them or order to them, or?
There should be. This is the full run of Gibbon's, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, the Folio Society of Great Britain, and I'm very happy to have those, and I used them in this most recent book. That's the Folio Society again, one of my favorite books, Democracy in America by de Tocqueville. This is a run of all of Du Bois's published works that Henry Louis Gates and Oxford Press compiled, and I have an essay on Black Reconstruction. I introduced Black Reconstruction in that series. I'm very happy to have that collection. At the bottom row, that's mostly European stuff. Third Reich, The Light That Failed, that fine book on the First World War. A good friend who's a chess master, he even does the three-dimensional. That's far beyond my ken. But from time to time, I allow myself to be challenged by him. I go down to defeat, but it keeps me kind of tarted up when it comes to the game. I love the game. Haven't kept up as much as I'd like, but this helps, and it's a very handy set to travel with, and so I do. And when we leave for Germany, it will go with me on the Lufthansa, and my wife and I will have a game.
We visited the Massachusetts headquarters of Kurzweil Technologies for a tour by author and inventor Ray Kurzweil in November of 2006. Mr. Kurzweil is the author of several books on the subject of artificial intelligence, including The Age of Intelligent Machines and The Age of Spiritual Machines. Included in the tour is a clip from the 1960s television program, I've Got a Secret.
Starring Steve Allen. First of all, would you tell the folks your name and the size of the curtain that's moving in? Oh, I'm sorry. Your name, please.
My name is Raymond Kurzweil, and I'm from Queens, New York.
Queens, New York. Well, panel, Raymond and I just happened to have brought along this little piano here, as you see. And Raymond, in addition, also happens to have, as the old saying goes, happens to have a piece of music with him. And before we show the audience what his secret is, we have just a few seconds for Raymond to play this piece of music. Raymond, the piano's all yours.
Thank you.
Nicely played, and now your performance, of course, leads into your secret, so if you'll whisper it to me, we'll let everybody at home know what's up. Well, that certainly deserves applause, but, oh, the subway's leaving, I'm sorry. That deserves applause, but what has it got to do with the music? I don't understand that. Ah, I see. Raymond's secret concerns something that he did, and we'll start the game this time with Bess Myerson.
Raymond, that's a very unlikely sounding piece of music. Am I being super critical?
No?
Did you compose it?
No, I didn't.
Oh. Did you, however, were there some kind of formulas or letters or something unusual used to compose, to make up the notes of this piece?
You could say that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for example, would the notes spell out a name, or would they be a mathematical formula, or anything like that?
Not spell out a name, nothing like that, no.
But there are very...
$20 down, 60 to go. Henry?
Was that thing written by a computer?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. Is it writing music at this moment?
Right now it's writing a tune.
Writing a tune. I have a feeling that as a non-scientist, I'm not going to understand this too well, but perhaps you can explain how it works. First of all, I want the folks to see sort of some of this. This nest of spaghetti-like wire here is united to a bunch of little watts. What are these black things over here, Raymond?
Well, those are relays, and that's what does the trick. That's what writes the music.
I see. The relays write the music. They feed it into this white cheese box here, whatever that is. And there are three little... Are these wires or just pieces of string?
Pieces of string or wires.
I mean, does a message go through there, or are they just full of
No, that's just recording what the computer says.
I see. And then the typewriter does the final part of the process.
Ray Kurzweil, what were you thinking as you were watching that?
I haven't seen that for a while. I looked pretty relaxed there at age 17. So.
What made you want to create a computer that could write music?
That was actually my first pattern recognition project. I mean, that's been my field of interest. I've been fascinated with how the human brain is able to recognize patterns, and we actually realize now that that is the heart of human intelligence. I mean, that is what humans are good at. That's where we still excel in comparison to machines, and that we can recognize patterns, only certain type of patterns. But machines are getting better, and I've been studying that field and trying to teach computers to recognize patterns. And that, I think, is really the heart of human intelligence. When we figure that out, we'll be able to create machines that have the full range of human intelligence.
And why is it important to have machines do that?
Because it's an expansion of our own intelligence. I mean, we already expand our own intelligence with our machines. And we routinely do intellectual feats that would be impossible without our computers, whether it's math or science. In fact, few professionals could do their jobs today without our machines. We have an exponentially expanding knowledge base. We're the only species that has knowledge, and that doubles in size every year. And we need our technology to keep track of it. And we need pattern recognition to actually find the information that we want to find. And so this is really part of the manifest destiny, if you will, of our civilization, to expand knowledge. And pattern recognition is really the key to both creating knowledge and finding it and applying it.
We're going to take a look at some of the technology that he employs in his lab.
So what is Kurzweil Technologies?
Well, my field is pattern recognition, teaching computers to recognize patterns. And that's actually, in my opinion, the bulk of human intelligence. That's what humans do well. But computers are mastering that as well. So my first project was character recognition, teaching a computer to recognize any type style. That was actually the first time that was done. And then I did large vocabulary speech recognition. And we've applied pattern recognition to other types of patterns, EKG, heart signals, financial data. We have a company that looks at that. And that's really, I think, the most important area of artificial intelligence. And ultimately, when we create a machine that will be at human levels, it will be because computers have mastered human levels of pattern recognition. But that's been my interest. So I've started about 10 companies commercializing and developing different aspects of pattern recognition.
Right behind you, we can see over your shoulder is a screen that is doing artwork as you talk. What is that?
Well, that was actually created by another computer scientist, Harold Cohen, who's worked for 30 years on actually mastering at least one style of human art. He has thousands of rules about how to create a painting. And this is a technology we've sponsored, and you can download it at kurzweilcyberart.com for free. Every painting is different, and it's actually won awards in museums, but every 2 minutes it's painting a different picture.
In the corner you have an Edison voice writer?
Yes, well, Edison's actually a good model for what we're trying to do, because he was continually coming up with creative ideas, thinking about what technology could do in the future, and working on lots of different inventions, really to recreate sound and visual world using the technology at that time. He created the first motion picture and the first phonograph record. This is actually an early phonograph record where you could actually record and play both music, and it was also used for business correspondence. You could do dictation on it.
And over here there's something that looks like a human being but is not a human being.
Well, it's sort of symbolic of what we ultimately are trying to do, which is to recreate human performance. So he's, by looking somewhat realistic, is a symbol of that. And so we've worked on trying to recreate human speech recognition, different aspects of human vision in our reading machines. We're actually going to be adding not just the ability to read print, but actually recognize objects to our reading machine. So a blind person can just hold the camera point it at a room, and it'll actually tell him or her what's in the room, identify the objects and the people. So we're trying to recreate human skills.
There's a medal down on a table here and a picture of you with President Clinton. Can you tell that story?
Well, it's not much of a story. It's when I got the National Medal of Technology from the president. But that was a nice experience. This is actually a cartoon I commissioned in 1965, 40 years ago. And I had an interest in artificial intelligence at that time, and so this is a cartoon I designed. It was implemented by an artist friend of mine. And it pokes fun at, or at least it comments on the nature of human experience. That brain is obviously having experiences in a virtual reality environment, because it doesn't look like he's having much fun. But we live inside our brains, and ultimately we'll actually be able to have our brain feel like it's in some other environment rather than the environment we're in. For example, the nanobots could shut down the signals coming from our real senses, replace them with the signals that we would be receiving if we were in a virtual environment. And then our brain will actually feel like it's not in the environment that it's really in, but it would be in some virtual world. And it'll be just as convincing as real reality. And we'll have a virtual body. You've got to move your hand, it'll move your virtual hand. And it will feel very real. So that's actually, and that'll be feasible in 20 years or so. And that'll actually be a realization of this cartoon, which I designed 40 years ago. So this is actually the original Kurzweil reading machine. And it was actually the first CCD flatbed scanner. The imaging device can only see about an inch, so it actually scans each line individually. But this was the first scanner, flatbed scanner, which is now ubiquitous. And I developed the first omnified character recognition, the first character recognition that could recognize any type style. And that was sort of a solution in search of a problem. And I happened to sit next to a blind guy on a plane who said, gee, he can do anything, he's quite independent, but he can't read ordinary printed material. So that really, from that point on, I devoted the character recognition software to the blind reading problem. And we developed the scanner. We actually developed the first full text-to-speech synthesis. Those were 3 distinct technologies, and we put them together in the first print-to-speech reading machine. And this is from the 70s. It came out in 1976. But you can see it's the size of a dishwasher. And it's looking for the first page of print.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure.
When this came out, character recognition at that time could only deal in a single type style. It had to be unit-spaced. Letters could not touch one another. It couldn't deal with any kind of printing errors. The people actually retyped documents using a special type ball with the selector typewriter before they would scan them in using character recognition. So this was the first really intelligent character recognition. And a version of this was actually used to create these big databases in the 1970s and early 80s, like Lexis and Nexus. So that was a commercial application. But this was the first print-to-speech reading machine for the blind. And since it was expensive and large, it was used in institutions like libraries and schools. And over the years, it's come down in size. Up until recently, the Kurzweil 1000 was a small desk-based system, a little scanner with your personal computer. But it was still a desk-based system. You had to bring material back to your desk. And there's a lot of material you can't bring back to your desk, like sign on a wall or a bank ATM display. You could bring a menu back to your desk, but you'd rather read it in the restaurant. Labels in your clothing, remainders at a book sale, handouts at a meeting. So the Holy Grail has always been a device that a blind person can take in their pocket and just take out and read material as they go through the day. So it took 30 years, because this was 1976, and actually this year, 2006, 30 years later, we introduced the first pocket-sized machine. So this is the Kurzweil National Federation of the Blind Reader. We developed it with the National Federation of the Blind. I actually worked with them on the first reading machine in 1976. This is 1,000 times smaller than that first reading machine, 1,000 times lighter, And the computer is actually 1,000 times as powerful, so it gives you some idea. That's a 1,000,000-to-1 ratio in terms of the power of computation. A blind person could just hold it up to a wall and it'll tell them where the print is, if it's cutting off the right or left edges.
Field of view report. Right bottom and left edges are visible, 44% filled.
Okay, so it sees most of the edges. We'll take a picture. And it's going to give us progress reports. This page could be rotated any amount. In fact, it deals with 3 different degrees of freedom of tilt and rotation. And so you can really hold the camera any which way, and it'll actually correct the image inside its memory.
0 degrees clockwise relative to the page.
So it said I got it right on,
Processing image.
but I could have rotated it.
Page 1, GNL 289. The AI winter is long since over. We are well into the spring of narrow AI. Most of the examples above were research projects just 10 to 15 years ago. If all the AI systems in the world suddenly stopped functioning, our economic infrastructure would grind to a halt.
Pages can be curved in a book, and the software in here actually straightens out the image, cleans it up, and enhances it, and then does the recognition of the letters, and then figures out the pronunciation. And so all of that's being done in the computer inside this device. It's actually a good example of my models of predicting technology trends, because in 2002, 4 years ago, I had a conversation with the National Federation of the Blind. They said, well, when do you think these portable reading machines will be feasible? And I said, according to our models, the requisite digital camera and pocket computer technology will be feasible in 4 years, by 2006. And that actually turned out to be exactly correct. And I also felt it would take 4 years to develop the software. So we started 2002, and the software got done, the hardware became available right on schedule, and we introduced this in 2006. Other people are now waking up to the fact, oh, the cameras and pocket computers are powerful enough to do this, and they're starting the research now. It's going to take them a few years to develop the software. So we have a jump on the market because of our ability to predict where technology will be in the future. And this is something I've been doing for 30 years, and my books are based on the same technology models. So we can forecast where technology will be in 4 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. One of my companies, we developed the first text-to-speech synthesis. That was the company that developed the first reading machine. This was in the 70s. And another company that I started developed the first large vocabulary speech recognition that was actually commercially marketed. And I put those two together with some contemporary language translation software and created a translating telephone. And I've actually used this to communicate with people in other countries. And this will be a routine service of your cell phone in a few years, early in the next decade.
This is a demonstration, comma.
Dies ist eine Demonstration.
Of a prototype of a quote translating end quote telephone. Period.
Von einem Prototyp eines übersetzenden Telefons.
Within a few years, comma.
Innerhalb einiger Jahre.
We will be able to talk to anyone, comma.
Wir werden fähig sein, zu jemandem zu reden.
Regardless of their language. Period.
Ohne Rücksicht auf ihre Sprache.
The translations aren't perfect, but some of them are actually quite good. Human translators are better, but because human translators aren't always available. Now, for important UN discussions, they use human translators, but this would be a routine way to communicate around the world.
Merci pour votre attention. Period.
Thank you for your attention.
And what year will that become commonplace, do you think?
I think early in the next decade. This will be a routine service of your cell phone and communicators. Of course, we have language translation software already on the internet. It varies in quality. The better systems are actually quite good. I was out at Google and they showed me an English to Arabic and Arabic to English translator they had put together because they have these very large Rosetta Stone texts where they have the same text translated in English and in the other language, in this case Arabic. And they can use pattern recognition software to automatically find the translation rules. They didn't actually tell it how to translate it. They let the software find its own rules. And this system actually compared well to human translators, and nobody on the team that created it spoke a word of Arabic. So the system actually found its own rules. And so language translation is getting better. Well, I spent about half my time on communication efforts, which includes giving speeches, writing books, articles, operating this website we have, kurzweilai.net, and about half my time developing technology and the businesses associated with them. So it's all mixed up. I mean, I don't have to spend a day writing a book. The process of writing a book goes through different stages. I'll spend quite a bit of time gathering material. I'm actually doing that now on a future book, which I probably won't write for a few years, tentatively called How the Human Brain Works and How to Build One. Then, once I've gathered material, I actually write the whole book as an essay. And so it's one short piece, maybe it's the length of a chapter, and actually expresses the whole book. And I'll get feedback on that. And then I'll start expanding sections, expand this, expand that, explain that. I work with a team of people that continually gives me feedback. Gee, you ought to explain this more. You ought to expand that. So I'm getting a lot of feedback during this process. And over time, that essay keeps getting bigger and grows into a book. And I organize the material as I go along. So I don't just write the book from start to finish. It kind of starts as a seed and expands in place. And I have a couple other techniques. I actually write dialogues at the end of each chapter. I've done this for all of my books about the future of science and its impact. Because the material is challenging, and this actually on multiple levels. It's technically challenging, and it's also perhaps challenging to people's views about the world. And so this provides some sort of comic relief. These are tended to be humorous dialogues about what I've just written, but they also may have serious messages. So you'll have Charles Darwin, Sigmund Freud, some imaginary characters, myself, bantering about the material that was in that section. Or you might have two bacteria from 1 billion years ago talking about whether it's a good idea and what are the dangers of their becoming more complex creatures, for example. I will actually go through a process of gathering all of the relevant research and actually printing it out and reading it. I have many boxes of material that went into the Singularity is Near. We have a website, singularity.com, that actually has all of that background material on it with links to most of the stuff, at least the stuff that's online, that I read in order to write that book. So my research team will be sending me books, links, articles, and I'll read that and mark it up. And so it's kind of synthesizing and organizing all this material so that it's approachable, compelling, and most of all makes the case that I want to make, because I've got some ideas that belie the common wisdom. I'm using pretty conventional tools. I mean, search engines are great. I use some other databases for medical and scientific research. And my researchers are using different kinds of databases. The online knowledge is amazing. I think once or twice we went to an actual physical library when I was working on The Singularity is Near. But now you can really find the information online. When I wrote my first book, I mean, there was no internet. It was the mid-'80s, and we spent a lot of time in the library. But I use Word. I do use speech recognition sometimes, but I'm actually a very good typist. That's the one course I took in high school that was useful. And so I type about 100 words a minute. I can do speech recognition about 60 words a minute. That's actually faster than most people can type, but that's actually doesn't speed me up. But I do some of my writing with speech recognition. But my tools are pretty conventional. I mean, I write when I'm traveling. If I'm on a 5-hour plane flight, that's good, uninterrupted time. They don't allow phone calls, and the internet's not there. So actually, there's nothing you can do but write. I do generate footnotes or endnotes, scientific citations as I go. These books are heavily notated because I'm making strong claims and it needs strong scientific validation. So Fantastic Voyage, which I wrote with Dr. Terry Grossman, and my latest book, The Singularity is Near, each have about 2,000 scientific citations. Now, the one book I wrote as a collaboration was Fantastic Voyage, Live Long Enough to Live Forever. And that was actually an interesting process because both of us have strong opinions on everything in the book. And we're 99% on the same page on all of these health issues. And that was really a prerequisite. If we didn't have really the same views fundamentally, we couldn't have collaborated. But we actually cared a lot about that 1%. And we have, you know, we would have sometimes 50 emails going back and forth on one endnote, which most readers wouldn't care about. But we really cared about each issue. And it came out a much better book as a result, because we didn't just say, okay, well, you can have this issue and I'll have this issue. We actually tried to get to a deeper understanding of anything that we didn't see eye to eye on. And in every case, I'd say we came out to where we really would explore an issue more deeply and come to a better resolution. You know, rewriting and revising is a really important part of writing, whether it's a short essay or a whole book. And I go over and over it. And if I go over, you know, let's say a chapter, and I haven't made any changes, or maybe just made some very minor changes, and I'm happy, and I really feel all of it's approachable, comprehensible, convincing, humorous, where it needs to be, and I'm happy with the whole thing, then I feel I'm done. So it's not a set process, and you know, I will revise compulsively many times. I mean, T.S. Eliot said that you know, revision was the key to a successful poem, and he would go over it, a poem, hundreds of times till he really felt completely happy with it. So it's a matter of being a perfectionist, really, and you know, to paraphrase, I know it when I see it. So I know I'm done when it feels done. But there's no sort of preconceived formula. So this is the Kurzweil 250. It's actually was the first electronic musical keyboard that could recreate realistically orchestral instruments like the grand piano. And the grand piano takes more than just sampling to capture, because it has a very complex response. All the overtones are not perfect multiples of the fundamental frequency, and if you just sample a piano tone and then loop the last waveform, it sounds like an organ. And so samplers and other synthesizers did not sound realistic when this came out. This was really the first electronic keyboard that could realistically capture the grand piano, and that's actually the most complex instrument. So, and this was 20 years ago, 1984. And it had a lot of different instruments.
A few weeks ago, we visited author and linguist John McWhorter at his home in Jersey City, New Jersey. He was our March in-depth guest. John McWhorter has written several books, including Authentically Black and Losing the Race. His latest, forthcoming in May, is all about the beat, why hip-hop can't save Black America.
A typical day for me is I have a writer's schedule, and so I generally get up at about 9:30 and put on the coffee, read the New York Times, then online go through a whole bunch of other sources I like to go to. Generally, I start writing something around 11:30 or noon. I don't eat breakfast. If I eat lunch, it tends to be late. And it depends, because I do a weekly column for the New York Sun. And writing day is usually Tuesday or Wednesday. And so if it's one of those days, then I'll get working on that. It generally takes about an hour for me to do a column. Usually I'll have done some sort of broad outline the night before. If I'm writing a book, then it's a matter of working up a kind of yeast, which usually for me is about a 60-page outline festooned with first draft text samples, and then making that into a book is a matter of taking the part of the outline that will correspond to that chapter and fleshing it out into something. And that's just a matter, especially with word processing technology, that's a matter of endless revision. I don't know what my process would have been 20 years ago when it was a matter of longhand and typewriters, but now it's a matter of taking that word processing document and just massaging it until it's right. But actually, I think of myself primarily as a writer. It's what I really like to do. I think to an extent there's a public perception out there that I think of myself as a quote-unquote commentator, or that if someone's seen me on TV that they think that that really excited me, no offense about this, but that's the thing that I'm really seeking. Whereas for me, I'm most comfortable sitting precisely in this chair and being at the computer and putting my thoughts into written form, which I think is much cleaner than the mess of oral language and human interaction. So what I really am is a writer. That's what I do. And I am very lucky that I have managed to be able to put food on the table doing that.
If it's a book that you're writing on, how long in a day, how many days a week will you work on it, and how long will a workday be?
When I'm doing a book, which is most of the time, right now I am not writing a book, and I think it's the first time in about 10 years that I have not been either writing one or about to write one. But generally, I work on a book 7 days a week, barring irregularities. I mean, if there's family business, or if I'm on a trip, or there's a big day or something like that, then of course I won't. But especially now that you can take your computer everywhere, I'm a bit of a workaholic, and so it would be every day. I tend to write in long, concentrated stretches, and so I'll sit and plug away at it for, say, 3 hours at a time. As time goes by, I find that the wee hours are good for me. It's good for me and bad for me because I don't get enough sleep. But I find that when the world is quiet, when there's no possibility of phone call or having to deal with something, I get my best work done and the most work done, because I've got kind of a disorder. I don't know what it is. I can't work unless I have complete concentration. Like, as soon as my wife and I have a child, I know I am probably never going to write anything again, because I need unbroken concentration. And with that, I can get quite a bit done. But the way other people seem to write, where they write for 20 minutes and then they get up and take care of something, and then they write for another 15 minutes, I could not create a through line that way. And when I have to work under conditions like those, I don't do what I consider my best work. So there is definitely a wee hours tendency. And nevertheless, I force myself to get up at 9:30 a.m. anyway. And so I guess I'm getting used to the sleeplessness, which I hear will become a normal part of life once there is the pitter-patter of little feet. My cat is near my feet right now.
When you're working on the book, the research part of it, How do you incorporate that into your work? Where do you do your research, and how do you organize it?
My research for linguistic-oriented issues is a matter of keeping up with certain journals, of course, and reading books that come out. Here in my greater New York life, I use the Columbia University Library and also the New York Public Library for that sort of thing. And then I buy what I can. For race research, I suppose the main source of it is that I try to read as much about race as possible. I think it could be said that I either read or skim one book on race every week. I try to read the books by people I don't agree with as much as the ones who I do. And I guess the research comes from doing that. When you are in the position that I'm in, you get sent an awful lot of books and you get asked to review an awful lot of books. And so that's something that works for me. So there's that research process. And then the fact is that in 2008, a lot of research is being online, and hey, sweetie, is being online and reading blogs and the references that you get from there. I have all sorts of sites that I regularly go to and learn all sorts of things. And so research is something that happens in many ways, but mainly for me, it's a matter of being a readaholic. And so I need my text. I feel text deprived if I don't engage with text to a certain amount every day. So that's how one does research.
Do you separate the research from the writing? I know a lot of writers do that, or some don't do it. Do you do research then write, or do you incorporate it both?
I think they're incorporated because, for example, if I'm doing research, then what I learn I'll put into my yeast outline of whatever book is coming up, or whatever academic article I'm about to write in linguistics or something like that. It's pretty holistic these days, especially because you can carry your typewriter, so to speak, around with you all the time. And so it's all pretty cumulative for me.
The books you have here in this room, are there certain standards that you go to? Why are these books here?
No one has ever asked me about my process. This is interesting. No one seems to think that there is one. This study is my playpen, basically. It's my favorite room. And yeah, there is an organization in here. I don't know how much the camera can move to take it in, but these are my most important linguistic sources. And so the large dictionaries and the reference books, and I need them right here in case I'm writing something on language. If I want to know what a word is in German, I can grab this book. It smells good. There's also the Africana Encyclopedia here if I need a quick fact on something that someone has asked me about, or a date that I can't remember. When you go up, those are all the books that I've written. I would never have them like that in the living room or something like that, but I do like to have them there just so I can grab them. It's not a matter of display. I don't have my books upstairs. Then they're up here, and then going across up there, those are my dinosaur books. And I love languages and I love race, but I also am a dinosaur fanatic. I never got over that kind of listy affection for dinosaurs that a lot of kids have when they're 7. Still buy every book that I can. And I love that subject so much that I want the better and prettier books as close to me as possible. Then down here is linguistic descriptions of languages for linguists. And so the ones that I use most often are there, so I just have to kind of get up. And over here is various academic linguistics volumes. And so if I need to get one of those, I can reach over there. Behind the camera right now is the race shelf. And so everything that I would need about race is reachable right there. Then over here is my academic linguistics shelf, which is now groaning, and I need to get another one, but that's all of those. So yeah, there is an organization in this room, and then my file cabinets are over there. It's becoming antique. It's a cabinet full of actual paper articles that one Xeroxed, and I used to need that. I'm gradually realizing that I don't put anything new into those cabinets anymore. Now it's all here, but still I can't throw those things away. One book I'm reading, Dorling Kindersley do these beautiful books, and this one is about the human body. And another one of my childhood interests was anatomy. I got a big kick out of knowing about the small intestine and stuff like that. And so there are just these fantastic pictures in this book, like my right knee is beginning to bother me, and I learned why by looking at the pretty pictures in this book. And so I read 2 or 3 pages out of this when I have a lull. Or here is this is my table where this week I'm reading Alex Ross's book, The Rest is Noise, about classical music in the 20th century. I take the paper cover off because it slips while you're reading it. It's always good to keep in practice with your Hebrew verbs. I recommend it to everybody. So that is what's on my table right now. So this is my Mickey poster. I am a huge cartoon fan. Cartoons make me happy, watch a lot of them, got them on DVD. And actually, if we could pan downward, this is an original cell from Rikki Tikki Tavi. That's a mongoose. That's a Chuck Jones TV special from the 70s. I frankly never liked the special that much, but through a connection I did get this. So that's an original drawing. And this, actually, on this wall, this is me. This is me when I was, I guess I'm probably 3, and I've got a little typewriter. I actually liked writing even then. I don't know what I would have been writing, but I was doing it, and obviously that wasn't staged, and that's a picture that my father took. So,
what about the other things over here on the wall?
Oh, these other things. So, this is the Instruments of the Symphony Orchestra, which is a poster that I originally got from one of the Smithsonian's bookshops. This is the 4th version of it I've had. I had one in college, it got frayed. I've had one in various apartments. So this one, I put a cheap frame on so that it won't get frayed. This one is, this is dinosaurs. This is from National Geographic, Dinosaurs of North America, and I thought that was just so pretty that I had it cheaply backed with foam so that it would kind of hold up. That's what that is. And over here in the corner, this is, I don't usually share this, but for a few days, the book that kind of put me on the map, Losing the Race, was actually at #1 on Amazon. I think maybe it was like 2 days. And so I just printed that out because I wanted to be able to see that. So that's sitting there. This is Marie Dressler and Lionel Barrymore in the MGM movie of 1933, Dinner at 8. It's one of my favorites. I forget why I have this still, but it's been around so long I figured I'd put it in a cheap frame. That is my PhD diploma. Yeah, this is a lamp. This is an autograph from the last surviving participant in the radio show The Great Gildersleeve. I have a pretty big old radio collection. And the Gildersleeve show was one of my favorites. And so I went to an old radio convention because I heard that Shirley Mitchell would be there. She played Leela Ransom. There's going to be like one person out there who knows what I'm talking about. But I got an autograph from a perplexed Shirley Mitchell. And so that sits here in a cheap frame in the corner by the window.
Along with cartoons and dinosaurs, you are a musician.
I guess you could call it that. I like music a lot. I like, in particular, I'm a big fan of musical theater music, and so is my wife, both sides of her family, so I lucked into that. And I'm a jazz fan, I like classical music, a lot of kinds. I try to keep my ear on hip-hop as much as I can for all kinds of reasons. I did a book on it this summer, and so I think I practically blew out one of my eardrums, but there's always that. And now we're in the living room, and that's where music stuff is. This is a piano, and I play it. I guess I shall play.
How often do you play?
Oh, every day. Yeah, sometimes I do that into the wee hours. and, you know, kind of cocktail piano. I used to play for rich people's parties in the Palo Alto area when I was a grad student at Stanford, and it used to give me pocket money. And I've tried to keep it up. This is Isn't It Romantic, which is by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart in 1932 for the movie musical Love Me Tonight. Never been taped doing this before. What a weird feeling. I'm used to just talking. But that's kind of the way I play. And I enjoy doing that more than almost anything. I mean, there's some foods. There's, of course, the thing that I can't mention. And I do love my reading and writing. But in terms of, I think the pleasure most people get out of moving their body in conjunction with competition over spherical objects and things like that, which I do not do, I get out of playing. There is a high. The endorphins that people talk about getting through running and things like that, I get that through having a good play. So yeah, that's what this is. And
it might not be fair to ask you, but you said you like to sing. Is there anything you play and sing?
I don't do those things at the same time. And so, for example, a month ago, I did my 4th cabaret show in Manhattan, where I basically dig up really obscure theater and film music. I mean, the things that you only know if you are a crazed Asperger's syndrome buff of this stuff. And the ones that are very obscure and yet are still good. And I'll put together about 15 of those. One of my friends is a pianist, and I'll just do them for an hour, interlaced with supposedly witty patter. And so there is that. I used to do occasional performing on stage as a hobby. When Losing the Race came out and I started having 2 careers, gradually I stopped having the time to do it. And you know, the truth of the matter is that I don't really have an acting bug. You know, I started to realize that I don't really enjoy being on stage that much. I don't really get along with actors very well. I started thinking, think of all the hideous social experiences I've had backstage. And I started realizing this is really not for me. The last time I made an exception, actually, I wound up in Manhattan doing an off-Broadway production of Tom Stoppard's Arcadia. And a couple of my friends were producers, and I let them talk me into playing a pompous college professor, Bernard, because they said that the character fit me, and I understand where they were coming from. But for one thing, this character had an English accent, and I had never done one before, and it's no easier for a linguist to master an accent than anyone else. And so I didn't really even have it to even a decent degree until more or less the first performance, if that. And of course, the other 11 people were professional New York actors, and so they were highly impatient. And a couple of them were some of the most reprehensible human beings I have ever met in my 42 years. And of course, the theater was like this big, and you had to spend time with them, and you couldn't get away from them. It was just an absolute nightmare, worst experience of my adulthood. So that was probably my swan song to being a performer. But the cabaret shows where it's just me and I don't have to use an English accent are a great joy. It's nice to get up in front of people and instead of talking about the glum topic of race and having to face down the inevitable audience member who thinks I'm a terrible person, etc., I can just get up there and have fun and I can smile. I quickly noticed that if you're the controversialist about race, then even if you're making sense, you're not allowed to joke around too much because it seems like you're not taking these things seriously. And because I have an inherently snotty demeanor, I think that in particular, if I get up there and laugh about race issues, it looks like I think I'm better than people. So you have to be this glum person, and that's just the way it has to be. So I think a lot of people out there think of me as this humorless person who runs around in sport coats and things like that, when in fact I do not wear sport coats in my real life, and I'm actually a pretty goofy person. And with those cabaret shows, I get to come out and pick up that mic, and I don't have to say anything about affirmative action or Gina, Louisiana, or Barack Obama. I can sing some songs, I can make some jokes, I can talk about dinosaurs, I can talk about Jell-O. It is something that I do about once a year. It is a wonderful release, as is this instrument. Night and Day, Cole Porter.
Christopher Hitchens was our in-depth guest in September of 2007. He has written over a dozen books, including The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and Practice, and God is Not Great, his most recent bestseller. Christopher Hitchens is also a contributing editor to Vanity Fair magazine and a visiting professor of liberal studies at the New School. We visited his home in Washington, D.C.
This building is almost exactly 100 years old. It's 101 years old now. A very fine old building called the Wyoming, from the great days of the fin de siècle gentleman's apartment building in Washington. And this apartment, which wraps around the whole of the top floor, was originally built with this wonderful flooring that you can see, this wooden floor, which means it's almost like an ice rink. That's why I don't have any furniture, because I like sort of just rolling around it. By the architect of the building himself, for his own occupation. And I think that the great distinction of this apartment while I've been in it was that it was used by Clint Eastwood to film Absolute Power. Actually, one of his less good movies. It's about an art thief in Washington, D.C. who needs a safe house. And the presidential motorcade goes up Connecticut Avenue. We often hear it somewhere central. And came back, having lent the apartment to the movie makers, to find that all these walls were covered with knockoff paintings of the treasures of the National Gallery that the Clint Eastwood character had stolen. And I was really hoping that the producer would let me keep them, but he had to take them all away. My hood could be described, and maybe a realtor would want to describe it as Kalorama, because it sounds pricier, but actually I think Kalorama is the other side of Connecticut Avenue. It's what we call Embassy Row. Diplomatic buildings, residences, woods, gardens, very beautiful, pretty costly. Then if you break to the right out of my front door and go along Columbia Road, you come to Adams Morgan, sometimes called Madam's Organ, to indicate that it's our sort of Bohemia, our Latin Quarter, our little West Village, if you want. So, diplomacy on one side, Guatemalan music, Ethiopian restaurants, etc. on the other side, and then down Connecticut Avenue, straight to DuPont Circle, bookstores, cafes, restaurants, perhaps 3 Starbucks. So what you're seeing behind me is a sort of confluence of Washington, D.C., our nation's great capital. That's Connecticut Avenue, this north-south artery that runs, in effect, from the White House up to Maryland, crosses Massachusetts Avenue a bit lower down at DuPont Circle. That's the sort of radial axis of the city, you might say. Due west there is California Street, and this is Columbia Road curving round to our Adams Morgan district. There's the Russian trade mission. I'm told that there is still an apartment in this building run by the National Security Agency to monitor the goings-on there from the days of the old Soviet Union. You probably can't see it behind me, but on the horizon is the Russian compound. And those domes you see in the woods are the Naval Observatory buildings, on the grounds of which, of course, lives the Vice President. And then you see the British Embassy just in front of that, which is the extreme west end of Massachusetts Avenue, Embassy Row. So it's a good reminder of the small size and centrality of District of Columbia. And then there in the middle, on his horse, is General McClellan, President Lincoln's worst general, the man from whom he at one point asked to borrow the army, since the general appeared to have no use for it, and probably was a defeatist. He certainly ran against Lincoln later as a pro-slavery Democrat, may have had secret sympathies with the other side. It makes me laugh anyway, because on his horse he's still pointing south, in the wrong direction. The Confederates would have been that way. He's riding away from them. A little reminder of our history. A typical writing day for me depends on how atypical the previous day was, in that I tend to work late at night, and if it's been successful, I may not have gone to bed till 3. So the next writing day will probably not start till, say, noon or so on. But if you absolutely had to average a day, it would be like this. Get up, try and inhale some coffee, forcing myself to eat oatmeal for cholesterol purposes or anti-cholesterol purposes, blah, blah. Before lunchtime, I wouldn't get much done except answering emails and fending off whatever had accumulated. The world of telegrams and anger, as Ian Forster puts it, just coping with that, and then having lunch, which I usually do reading by myself, because I think the essential thing for being a writer is being a good reader. The main thing, as I keep saying, never tire of saying, is to keep testing yourself against other writers who are better than you. That's what qualifies one as a writer, I think, is permanently running the risk of having to say, I don't know why I bother. I think there are certain authors of whom one should have, all their books, even if you can go and borrow them from the library. So I know I have in this apartment every single word George Orwell ever wrote, for example, including his expenses reports to the BBC, the lot. Everything that's ever been published by him, anyway. Most of Marcel Proust, most of James Joyce, not all of P.G. Wodehouse, because actually I have to say that there are some books of his that aren't that worth keeping. It seems almost blasphemous to say that, but I do. But the cream of Wodehouse, Evelyn Waugh, Karl Marx, Leon Trotsky, Nabokov. It's a bit eclectic, as you see. Salman Rushdie, Martin and Kingsley Amis, Ian McEwan. I have pretty much all of what they've written. I like to think that I have a life rather than a job or than a career. And it's all to do with reading and writing, the only two things I was ever any good at, and public speaking, which I can also do. And that's how I make my living, but it's also what I am, who I am, what I love, and fortunate at that, because there's nothing else I can do. It's not as if I could have been a lawyer or a doctor, and I chose this, it chose me.
In April 2006, we visited author Shelby Steele at his home in Pebble Beach, California. Mr. Steele's first two books, The Content of Our Character and A Dream Deferred, discuss race and race-related social programs in America.
Shelby Steele, do you consider yourself to be a black conservative?
By fate, I think I became what our culture now defines as a black conservative. Because I began to feel, as time went on and we came out of the 60s and so forth, that the primary problem blacks had in America was not racism, not our victimization that we had obviously for so many centuries. And when you take that position that victimization is not our central problem, you will, no matter what your politics, be labeled a black conservative.
Our guest on In Depth this afternoon is Shelby Steele of the Hoover Institution. He's the author of 3 books. The Content of Our Character came out in 1990, won the National Critics Circle Award, And A Dream Deferred came out in 1998. And coming out next month is White Guilt.
My normal working day begins early. I like to get an early start, so I usually am up around 5 and I have a little coffee, and then I try to get in here and go and start work as soon as I can before the world invades, and then I try to work pretty steadily until at least 11 o'clock. And then again, hopefully I'm in the mood. Then I like to do a little exercise and eat lunch. And then I try to be back to work at least by 2, and then I sort of stay at it until maybe 5 o'clock or so. And that sort of ends the formal working day. I do more writing and serious work in the morning, and more reading and corresponding and with the world and so forth in the afternoon. My background is in literature. My PhD is in literature, and I taught in the literature department at San Jose State University for 16 years, if I remember right. But toward the end of that tenure, I began to write and publish essays on racial issues in America, and I came out with a book in 1990 and called The Content of Our Character, and I began to do more and more of that, and I sort of grew away from being the literature professor. And around 1994, I was invited to join Hoover and become one of their fellows, and so I did, and have been very happy there since. Most of the people there are people who like me, have come in sort of later in their career, and after they've really become focused and sort of have an idea of what they want to do and write about. The Hoover Institution is essentially, I suppose the common word for it is a think tank term. And it is at Stanford University, right in the center, smack in the center of the campus. It has the Hoover Tower is I think the tallest building on the campus. And it is a collection of fellows who do research. Most of them are in the area of economics and political science and history. I'm a little different in that my background is literature, but certainly I write on social issues, and so have much in common with many of them in that sense. There are probably around 80 or 90 or so fellows at a given time. They come and they have different kinds of appointments. Some teach on the campus at Stanford and have an appointment at Hoover. Others, like myself, are entirely at Hoover and am essentially supported in the work and the writing and research that I do on issues that have to do with public policy, particularly around race and so forth.
Our guest in December of 2001 was Pulitzer Prize winning historian David McCullough. His books include The Johnstown Flood, Truman, and John Adams. Book TV cameras visited the author's home and writing cottage at Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts.
We've got some video of your home and your writing shed. Where is it?
Well, it's first of all, Brian, it's not a shed. I mean, it's the world headquarters.
What's that? What's that on the
That's
screen?
our home. That's on Music Street in West Tisbury, Massachusetts, a village in the center of the island of Martha's Vineyard. The house is part of its 18th century, part of its 19th century, part of its 20th century. That's the back porch, looking out over the acre that we own, where we have gardens and a nice reach back to the bordering onto a neighboring farm, which has been in the same family since the island was first settled. And this is in effect, my walk to work. That's where I work, right there. That measures 12 by 8 feet. Has windows on all 4 sides. I absolutely love it. Has about 800 books in there, and my faithful typewriter, upon which I have worked now since about 1965. I've written every book I've ever written on that old Royal typewriter, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's really an example of a beautifully made American machine. It's probably got 750,000 miles on it, and it runs perfectly.
Now, have you written every word that's in John Adams in this room?
Everything, yes. Well, part of it was written in Charlottesville when we lived there for a year, the better part of a year, when I was doing research at the library at the University of Virginia. But essentially, all of it was written here in that room.
What time of day do you write?
I work all day, every day. I'm not writing all day. I'm reading or correcting what I wrote the day before, or I'm going over notes, or there's no phone, there's no telephone there.
Is there music?
Books, no music, no. There's a nice view, but I have my back to the view, so I won't be tempted by it. It's far enough from the house. There you see General Washington and some of his soldiers marching along. I hope they show the end of it, because there's a guy at the end that I identify with. He's the one that's always a little slow. He's catching up. He's not quite. Oh, here we're going to see him, and I look at him, and he's my example. There we no is there should be one. There he is. That's the one. He's always a little behind, and I work out there because when the children are young, I didn't want them to have to be walking around. Oh, that's a line. Look at your fish from Louis Agassiz. That's a call to me to really look at what's in front of me as I work the notes. That's one of the earliest, I think the earliest photograph of the Capitol. I love that photograph. I love old photographs. We can talk about this later, but that's how I got interested. This is the great line from Adams' letter to Abigail about may none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof, which is carved as it is indicated there into the mantelpiece of the state dining room at the White House. That's a map of Boston, which figures very importantly in the book I'm working on now. And of course it figured very importantly, it's a contemporary map in the John Adams book. I take everything that deals, there's a wonderful crayon drawing by a French artist of John Adams. I think it's one of the best, most representative of him ever done. And I love drawing, I love painting. I paint and draw myself, and since the only way we can see those people is in paintings and drawings, I find the drawings and paintings of the utmost importance in trying to reach the human being that one's writing about. Those are all the bound letters of George Washington, which again is part of what I'm working on. Those are some shards dug up on the property when we were building the little building where I work.
How long have you lived in that house there, and how long have you used it?
Well, we've lived in the house since we bought it initially in 1965 and paid less for it than you'd pay for a car today. And it was sort of the eyesore of the street, and we slowly began to restore it and fix it up. We lived for a term at Cornell. I was a writer in residence at the University of New Mexico for a while. We spent probably in the aggregate half a year at least in Independence, Missouri, when I was working on the Truman book. This is the other work area. This is where all of the paraphernalia of communications are located. The fax machine, the copying machine, the computer, the so forth. And oh, that's a little sign that says no cell phones permitted in this room, which I clipped from a hotel in London. I loved that little sign. That's Rosalie and I at Portofino in Italy having lunch. That's a photograph of when I spoke at the joint session of Congress, and I really love it because it showed Jim Wright falling asleep to my eloquence. Some grandchildren, that was Tom Kane, the previous picture, Rosalie's grandfather from Ireland, who had a lovely Irish, that's one of my watercolors there of a house on Martha's Vineyard. The paintings are sort of here and there around the house. I give them to children. That's one from our hotel room in Boston. That's at Boston. There's a public garden.
How long does it take you to paint?
Well, it depends. These are watercolors, which are done pretty quickly. That's at the Crow Reservation. in Montana. That's a little sketch of a farm near the house where we live, a little pen and ink that I did. It's something I've always loved to do, and I think that's our oldest daughter, Melissa, and our first granddaughter, Caitlin, and John McDonald, her husband. That's the public library across the street where I've served as a trustee over the years. So you see, you see our house there. See how far I had to go to get to the library. I used to say to my friends, would you like to go into the library for brandy and cigars? And we'd walk across the street into the little library at night. That's the church where some of our children were married, and that's right on the corner of where we live.
I have in my lap here one of those old photographs you're talking about. It's really, it's got some creases in it. Who's in this photo?
Well, that's a picture of my mother, probably taken before I was born.
Mother on the left?
Mother on the left, and my Aunt Marty McCullough on the right. I love it because it's such a wonderful period photograph. There's a great old car in the background. Cars always date photographs. I always put a car in your photographs, and you'll know when they were taken. But I appreciate that picture because my Aunt Marty, who's in the picture, was the one who gave me a copy of A Stillness at Appomattox when I graduated from Yale.
Bruce Catton.
And that started me reading Bruce Catton, which started me reading Shelby Foote, which started me reading Barbara Tuchman and a lot of other people. And I didn't know it at the time, but the Bruce Catton book really changed my life because I began to sense what I wanted to do as a writer.
Stanley Crouch lives in Lower Manhattan. He was our in-depth guest in October of 2003. Mr. Crouch is the author of such books as Notes of a Hanging Judge, Don't the Moon Look Lonesome, Reconsidering the Souls of Black Folk, and Dead Man Blues for Sabretooth.
We're in the West Village, near the Hudson River, and I've been living here for 20 years.
What kind of neighborhood is this in the West Village?
Well, it's considered a good neighborhood, or I guess it'd be called middle class or upper middle class, or something a bit of a distance from the bottom. That is to say that one isn't harassed by loud radio playing, people making noise in the street very often. I mean, every now and then you've got some clowns coming down the street making a bit of noise, but it's fairly quiet so that you don't really have to deal with those kind of external, irritating external things that many other people in a lower position in society do.
And this is the room we're in is your office? This is where you work?
Yes, this is my office. I work in here, and my wife and I live next door in another place.
What's a typical work day like for you in here? How do you go about writing?
Well, I get up, I guess, every day about 6 o'clock, 6:30. I come in here, I read the newspapers on the internet, then I start writing something.
And the writing is done on this computer here?
Yeah. See, whenever I write something, I've written about 6 or 7 versions. If I'm writing a scene in a novel or writing a passage in an essay, I have many different versions of it. And so I'll fill up these files. There'll be file after file, and it'll be called so-and-so this or so-and-so 2, so-and-so 3, so-and-so 4, whatever it is. Then when I get to a certain point, I'll read all of them and figure out which one is the best, or begin to take things out of different parts. Or sometimes I'm going along and I will realize that there's a phrase, no more than that, in another file. And then I have to go back through all the files to search out that phrase if I don't remember it. But sometimes I'll say, no, that's not it. It's that, perhaps 16 words somewhere, because 16 words can always be very important.
I see there are a lot of filing cabinets around here that have Parker A through E and Parker on them. Do you use those, or what's contained in those files?
Those files contain all of the interviews from the long-awaited Charlie Parker book. Long-awaited because I've been working on it for about 22 years. Let's put it like this. I've been known to be writing it for about 22 years. I've been working on it for 22 years. But I'm about 2 years from completing it now. I've written over 400 pages. I've done many interviews. Many of the people whom I interviewed are now dead. And so I think it's time for me to finally get the book out there because many people seem to be interested in it. Parker was a remarkable character. He was extraordinarily talented. He helped make an addition to the aesthetic possibilities of jazz. He didn't advance it. I don't really believe in that idea. I think he added another choice for players that you could play or write in the style that he and Dizzy Gillespie and a few other people more or less invented. Well, not more or less, did invent. And so his story, which is a short one from 1920 to 1955, crosses the Depression, it crosses World War II, and it ends shortly after the Supreme Court decision in 1954. So there's a lot that happened during his lifetime.
A lot of books in your room here. How do you decide what to keep here, and do you use them when you're writing?
Well, these are more or less essentials, but there are many books that are stored in boxes down in the basement. A lot of books about jazz, a lot of books about film, about painting, about American culture, about race, I guess, if we want to call it that. Let's say the problems of color, the story of color and the problems of color as they manifest themselves in the United States or in the world at large.
I want to walk the audience through your books so far, because we've gotten a lot of calls about one of them, but it's one you co-collaborated on. This is 1979 to 1989 essays called Notes of a Hanging Judge, followed by The All-American Skin Game, or The Decoy of Race, the long and short of it, 1990 to 94. Then Always in Pursuit, Fresh American Perspectives, 95 to 97. And the most current work, a novel, Don't the Moon Look Lonesome. Next up, Stanley Crouch is going to take us on a tour of his bookshelf in his office.
Well, this book, Kenneth Clark, What is a Masterpiece? I read this often. It's a very important book for me because he makes a very clear, Clark had a very clear understanding of what made the masterpiece and how the masterpiece was always connected to the deepest aspects of the tradition out of which the artist came, and to the present in which the art was made. And it is the combination of the past and the present that gives the masterpiece enough energy to carry it into the future. The Disuniting of America by Arthur Schlesinger is very, very important because I think he puts in context exactly what our problems are at this particular time in terms of this idea of multiculturalism and stuff of that sort. Now, this book here, Divine Days by Leon Forrest, I think is probably the greatest Afro-American novel since Invisible Man. Flawed masterpiece though it is, at 1,100 plus pages, it still has some of the deepest, richest, most well-written passages to have entered American fiction. 1, 2, 3 on the third shelf next to the Webster's. Mm-hmm. That's Shakespeare. He's the ongoing champ. He understood the species. Now, there is, of course, then there's the Bible. I've got all kind of versions of that. I've got the New Oxford. I've got the 5 books of Moses. I've got the comparative study of the Bible. I've got the complete Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, why do I have that? See, the one thing about the Bible is this. You can be sure, almost positive, that anywhere you open it up, it's firing on you. You know, it's very, you know, every now and then you'll open it up and you'll get a long passage of genealogy. He begat, she begat, blah, 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 blah. But almost when you don't get to that, almost anything you stumble into, I mean, the writing, the understanding, the drama, the intensity, the rhythm, it's there. Very few books are like that. Bible is one of them, you know. The only one of them that I know of. You know, now, you know, you just, I mean, you say, oh, I don't know. You get in there and something's going on, right? Ellison, of course, towers over many of us in many ways for the creation of Invisible Man, for their extraordinary first book of essays, Shadow and Act. What a book. Yeah, we've got all of Ellison stuff, everything he did, right, you know. Juneteenth, no good. Invisible Man, Invisible Man, Invisible Man, excerpt from Ellison. My original copy of Shadow and Act. There's another Shadow and Act that's going to the territory, another Invisible Man, which I'm proud of because I think Ellison autographed both of these. Now, here is a flawed masterpiece by Philip Roth, a writer of stunning gifts. I mean, it's flawed only because it seems to me that he didn't really follow the obvious elements of race that that were involved, that were more than peripheral to this story. These markers are here so I don't have to read the book again. You know, not so I don't have to read it again, but so that certain things that really struck me, I can go right to them. And they're always, you know, they're either sentences, they're passages, they're things that help me understand the way in which the structure was organized. See,
is there color coding there with the green and the blue?
Sometimes it only means that I ran out of blue. Other times I'll figure out when I go back that one color means the passages that I really like, and others will be the ones that I like a little bit less, and other ones will be the ones that I like less than other two.
Historian and Professor John Hope Franklin is a longtime resident of Durham, North Carolina. Not only did we learn about his writing habits, we took a tour of his orchid greenhouse. Professor Franklin has served as president of the American Historical Association, the Society for Historical Archaeology, and Phi Beta Kappa, and has taught at Duke University, Howard University, the University of Chicago, and other institutions. His most popular book, From Slavery to Freedom, A History of African Americans, written in 1947, is currently in its 8th edition. Over 3.5 million copies of the book have been sold.
Can write for long periods of time. I take breaks. I go out to the greenhouse and I work for, let's say, an hour or two, maybe 2 hours. Then I take a break. I get up and walk around, and people have coffee breaks, and I have orchid breaks. I get up, I think about my orchids, and I go out there and stir around in the greenhouse for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then I come back and start working again.
We're in Professor John Hope Franklin's backyard, and he has a greenhouse back here. Could you tell us what you do back here?
Well, I've been growing orchids for almost 50 years. I got hooked on orchids when I was teaching one summer in 1959 at the University of Hawaii. And I came back, I was teaching in Brooklyn. I was living in Brooklyn, teaching there, and I came back, brought a few orchids. They promptly died because I didn't know what to do with them. Then I built a window greenhouse in Brooklyn, and that was, I really got started there then. I had a very good friend, Carl Wiffner, who was the curator of the collection of orchids at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. and he was on the faculty of Brooklyn College, and he taught me a great deal about growing orchids, and that I started there and went to Chicago from there and had a much larger greenhouse, and I grew orchids there for about 15 years, and then I came to Durham in 1980 and built my first really substantial hobby greenhouse, and it's sort of my dream greenhouse. Although sometimes I want a larger one, but I understand that anything larger than 17 feet wide and 24 feet long, you'll become a slave to the orchids rather than the other way around. So I've tried to content myself by having only what I call a hobby greenhouse. It's sort of crammed, but...
Could you show us some orchids?
Sure, I'd be glad to. This is ginger, by the way, which is a very nice complement to the orchids. Not too much blooming now, but these it's primarily orchids in here, although I do grow bougainvillea, which is up here, and I have some bromeliads and ferns and so forth down here, and banana tree back there. You have all kinds of things in here, but primarily orchids. I have orchids blooming all the time. These are old phalaenopsis. This orchid's been blooming for a year, non-stop. I don't know. It's really remarkable. Even I am enjoying that long. These are just opened very recently, the dendrobiums. Those are just beginning to open up there. Those dendrobiums up there.
Is it a difficult task or a specialized task to keep these orchids healthy?
Yes, it takes some doing. You have to keep the greenhouse fairly clean. By clean, I mean clean of fungus and various things that will be deterrent to their successful growth. This is a vanilla plant that has gotten out of control and has gone all the way ceiling. And vanilla is an orchid. It's the most important orchid commercially that there is, I think. These are all orchids, some of them getting ready to bloom. I'll show you. This is not an orchid. Streptocarpella, but it blooms all the time, and I enjoy it so much. I have two ways of writing. If the problem is complicated, I want to see what I'm doing. I write either by hand or perhaps on the computer, but primarily by hand, to try to work it out, to see what I'm doing, how I'm doing. And I just write in longhand on a sheet of yellow paper or some kind of paper like that. And I write for maybe several hours, just working and reworking. If the problem is simple and relatively uncomplicated, I will perhaps even begin by writing on the computer, just writing along. But it's a combination of writing by hand and writing on the computer. I used to write on the typewriter, but now I write on the computer.
So you don't do email?
No, I don't do email at all. I would not be able to write one paragraph to say nothing of a chapter if I did email. I think I'd spend my life doing email. I think it's something of a curse. This is one of the smaller orchids. It's in bud. It's getting ready to bloom now. This is Tolumnia. Tolumnia, that's the name of it. It's a branch of Oncidiums. This is a pink and maroon orchid, very beautiful when it blooms.
Where do you acquire these orchids?
Well, I acquire them. Sometimes I've brought some of these orchids in from abroad. You can get a permit from the Department of Agriculture and bring orchids in from Brazil. Some of them I brought from Brazil, some from Far East, Southeast Asia, some from the Caribbean, you know, all over wherever orchids grow. These are plumerias on the floor, not orchids, but I brought these as little sticks from Hawaii last year, and they will be blooming next year. One always has something to look forward to in a greenhouse because or in a tropical setting where things blooming you can talk about they're going to bloom next year or 2 years from now. I'm just now seeing an orchid over here that is getting ready to bloom, a Cattleya. It's just getting ready to bloom. I hadn't even seen it. There's one thing about coming into the greenhouse every day, you see something today that you didn't see yesterday. It's always growing. These are getting ready to bloom too. They break out of the sheaths and then they will bloom. This one is out, it's getting ready to bloom. I brought this from Bombay in 1976. It blooms every year. It'll be blooming in February.
Been taking care of that for 30 years, huh?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I've got some offspring of it too. I propagate this not by any high-powered scientific method, but it sends out little plants and I break them off and put them in a pot and they grow from there. This is Schomburgkia, which is getting ready to send out its leaves, its new leaves, its new shoots for growth. This little fellow will grow up to be big like these, and then it will be blooming. The mayor of Baltimore gave me this, Gordon Dillon, when I was there a few months ago. It's not blooming now, but it was blooming, full bloom then. This is an orchid that's named for me. It's called Leliocattleya John Hope Franklin. And there are a number of them here. Oh, these are John Hope Franklins from here down to here, and from here to the end of that, and from down here there's some.
Who named those for you?
The firm in Illinois called Oak Hill Gardens. I've known them for more than 30 years. When I was at the University of Chicago, I knew them there. And, we were very friendly, and they wanted to do something in my honor, and so they did that. These orchids over here are named for my wife. They're Phalaenopsis Aurelia Franklin. Aurelia Franklin Mendenhall. They were developed by a place in South Carolina, in Newberry, South Carolina. And they were very friendly and just were very fond of my wife. And when she passed away, they wanted to do something in her memory, and they did that. This is an orchid which I did not bring this from Borneo, but it developed in Borneo, and it's a Phalaenopsis, and the only Phalaenopsis that's really and truly fragrant, I think. It's very, very lovely. It has a lovely fragrance. And many of these came from Hawaii and from from East Africa, from the Far East, like Japan and Southeast Asia. I work in the old-fashioned way. I was trained 70 years ago, you see, so that I worked with note cards and file them away with proper subjects on the cards and so forth. And then I could organize them into a chapter, and then work from my cards to the manuscript, where if I was writing by hand, or to the computer if I was using it. That's very old-fashioned, I know now. I don't know how to do the research and writing that my young friends do. I think I'd be forever trying to get a book together. And these are phalaenopses up here, which are, I always have a lot of phalaenopses are blooming. This is a very lovely one here, I think. This is a lovely one up here. Yeah. They're all around. These are the little seedlings, the little one that this is the nursery, which I got.
That's how they start.
Yes, from the orchid that I brought from Bombay, India in 1976. I think it's very important for any person to have a hobby and a diversion from the main activity. And an orchid growing is always challenging. You learn a lot. And for a person who did not have any really scientific or botanical background, it's always fascinating, and I'm enthralled by the orchids and by growing. I've always been interested in growing things. My mother was a gardener, and she liked to grow things, and I followed her around when I was a little boy, and so this is sort of a continuation of that too. I was trained I was a professional typist, so I type with some speed, you know, and then I do touch typing. I don't look at the keyboard when I type, and that makes it possible to move pretty rapidly through anything like this. So I guess I type this in a few minutes, as a matter of fact. It's not a long piece. It's only a couple of hundred words, as a matter of fact. That's what we used to have to type in. Now it's time for all men to come to the aid of their party. That's a common kind of drill that we used to do when I was in high school. I belong to the American Orchid Society, and I belong to the Triangle Orchid Society, and I get publications from them. I get publications from the West Coast, and then I think I surely have at least 75 books on orchids, and I read them. I have a few encyclopedias on orchids, and I read them to keep up. Most orchids we have, all these are tropical orchids in here, but they're orchids that grow naturally in North Carolina and Virginia, and even in New Hampshire, Maine. I started an orchid garden out here, but the rabbits wouldn't let me carry that ambition out, so I let it go. But orchids can be grown. I mean, there are orchids are the largest flowering plant family on the face of the earth, so that orchids grow everywhere, just about everywhere. I don't think they grow in the Antarctica and the Arctic area, but they grow in Canada and in climates that we would not expect them to be growing, because most people regard orchids as tropical, and they're not. There are, of course, many, many tropical orchids, but they're not necessarily tropical.
Author and satirist P.J. O'Rourke was our in-depth guest in January of 2007. Mr. O'Rourke still uses a typewriter to produce his books and articles. We visited his Washington, D.C. apartment to learn how he writes, and he also showed us some of the art he collected while traveling the world on assignment as a journalist.
P.J. O'Rourke, what do you write about?
I write about things I don't understand. I write about things that I'm ignorant about. Now, there are a lot of writers out there who write about things that they do understand, whether it's suburbia or Franco-Prussian War or the ins and outs of lobbying in Washington. But what's always interested me, what makes me interested as a reporter, is that I don't understand a lot of things. Maybe I don't understand anything. Certainly don't understand most things. So I go out and I try and find out about them.
Here's P.J. O'Rourke in his Washington, D.C. apartment talking about his writing habits.
When you're working on a book, what's a typical day like for you?
I just get up and go right to it. I get up, have a cup of coffee, and go to work. And that's that. I find I've got about 4 hours of limited intelligence and many more hours, another 20 of no intelligence at all. And so I have to get moving right in the morning. And if things go well in that first 3 or 4 hours, then I can then push through for the rest of the day. But if I try and do something first, even something, as I'm forever explaining to my wife, something as simple as take the kids to school or make them breakfast, or even get their little their little boots and hats on, my concentration is destroyed for the day. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
We're in Washington now. You do most of your writing in New Hampshire?
We live most of the time in New Hampshire. I mean, New Hampshire is our real residence. We keep a apartment in Washington because I have to be down here on business fairly often. That's our excuse. The fact is we've been in this building on Connecticut Avenue forever. My wife and I both lived here before we met. And we both love the building, and we love the apartment we're in. And we just can't bring ourselves to give up the apartment, even though it sits here empty. But the kids are in school in New Hampshire, and so therefore we are married to New Hampshire for the school year, and then comes summer, and only a maniac would be in Washington in the summer if he didn't have to. So, I mean, so we live in New Hampshire.
Behind you is a typewriter.
An IBM Selectric 3.
That is how you do your writing?
Not only is that how I do my writing, this is one of about 5 that I own because friends of mine over the years have, of course, adopted modern technology and gone to computers and given up their IBM Selectrics, for which there is no market whatsoever, and they give them to me. And so there's one stored around here, and I think there are 3 in the attic at New Hampshire. So that, when it breaks, and it will, sturdy though they are, it will eventually break, and someday all the people who can fix them will have died off. I've got spares.
You must have friends who are writers who tell you that you're crazy to use a typewriter. What's that conversation like? How do you defend yourself?
Well, actually, I defend myself with something that Stephen King said. And I don't know Stephen King, and I don't really like horror stories. I'm not a huge Stephen King fan. I mean, he seems like a very nice man and so on and so forth. But Stephen King said when he first got a computer some years back, he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "this is amazing. I could have written 3 times the amount of stuff that I have written if I just had a computer." And I thought, saints forbid. The last thing on earth that I want is 3 times as many, Cujos, running around on the library. No offense to Stephen King. He's a credit to our profession. I wish him well. I don't mean to insult him, but I don't, 3 times as much Jane Austen, maybe, but somehow I feel that having a computer would not have generated 3 times as much Jane Austen for Jane.
When you're working during the day on a book, you say you try to write for 4 hours.
Well, actually, what I try and write a budget. I try and write 1,000 words a day. Oh, no, in a splendid, ideal world, that takes 4 hours, and I can goof off for the rest of the day, which never happens, unfortunately. More often takes 12. But I try to write 1,000 words a day. But it's that first 4 hours that 3 or 4 hours, you know, that time between waking up and lunch, that when my brain seems to work slightly better.
How about your reference material? You mentioned to me earlier, before we were recording, that you have an Encyclopedia Britannica.
I have. I not only have an Encyclopedia Britannica. Actually, I got a couple. I've got a facsimile of the original edition, 117, whatever, which is great. It's 3 volumes and contains no information. They didn't know anything back then. And I've got a 1945 edition that I picked up in some junk store, which is all right, you know. But the one that I prize and that I go to all the time is I have the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which came out. I have the American edition, which came out in 1911. And that was a great moment in human history because they knew everything. And they were perfectly certain about it all. And so whenever you want to be certain about something, really certain about something, you look it up in the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and there it is. No ifs, no buts, no shading, no weasel words, no wiggling.
1,000 words a day. How does the revision process work for you?
I used to be an editor for a living. I'm a quick reviser. I'm a quick editor. I'm a slow writer. Writing is no fun whatsoever, and it takes me a long time. But once I've got a rough draft, I'm pretty happy. That's very much the other side of the slope. This is a job I do. It's a craft. It's not an art. I'm not fulfilling some sense of inner, I don't know what. I feel more artistically fulfilled by building shelves in the garage. Rather uneven and wobbly shelves, I may say, but nonetheless, shelves in the garage. I stand back and I look at those, and I can just, fill myself with glee and have a beer and think what I've accomplished and stuff, much more than I do being a reporter.
P.J. O'Rourke has collected art from his travels, and here's some of it.
All the time that I've done overseas reporting, I've always brought back interesting things, or things that seemed interesting at the time. Sometimes you get them back and they aren't interesting at all. And my wife is something of the same. I mean, she has, I think she's a bit of a frustrated visual artist herself. And both of us are very interested in art and very interested in design. We don't know anything about it, but we have fun with it. And so quite a few of the things around here are souvenirs from trips. These little santos are from Paraguay. And Paraguay has got this very interesting subculture to it. Paraguay seems perfectly Spanish, Latin American, but practically everyone in Paraguay is partly or wholly Guarani Indian and speaks Guarani at home, and the Guarani Indians had a remarkably vivid tradition, a really skilled tradition of wood carving. So you go in these very ordinary churches in Paraguay, and the interior will be carved and painted to a fairly well. And a little manifestation of that are these little saints.
Why were you in Paraguay?
Oh, let's see. They threw out their dictator. I don't know. This was back in I don't even quite remember. I was back in the 80s. They threw out their dictator, and they were fighting with each other. And that's my job. Go cover troubled bunnies, and wherever. Although I found that Paraguay actually wasn't a very troubled place. Modern art from Romania. I was walking down the street in Romania, saw an art gallery, and I just liked it. And so ended up bringing back that from Romania. Again, the person in the gallery was Romanian and told me all about the artist. Unfortunately, she told me about the artist in Romanian. So therefore, I know nothing. Kuba cloth, I brought that back from Tanzania, although it's not actually from Tanzania. I think it's from eastern Congo. But I'm not absolutely certain because, again, it was explained to me in a foreign language. I'm like a really lousy connoisseur. This was due to drink. I was in Macedonia, and I had dined perhaps too deeply and too well, and was taking a little constitutional because the room was spinning slightly on my way back to the hotel. And I walked back by an art gallery, which was open late at night, and there was this amazing dead fish in the window. And I love paintings because you can roll them up and stick them in your luggage. When I unrolled that, there was some consternation in the house. But we've kind of fallen in love with it since. This is actually a well-known guy from Brazil. I was down in Rio for the ecological summit back in the 90s. And this is a guy named Platero, or that's the name he's taken. And he is, as his name would indicate, primarily a potter. But carrying pottery around is a dicey matter. But I love this painting. And this has been a huge hit with all three of our kids. They all go through a stage at about 3 where they're just fascinated by this painting. This was some store that used to be over in Union Station that sold Malaysian chachkas, and saw it and brought it home. On the other hand, all the Haitian art is indeed from Haiti, where I've been a couple of times, and I was trying to find things that adequately expressed how weird Haiti is. That does not. The one you're looking at right now, this is Haiti as the Haitians would like to see Haiti. Directly below it is Haiti as it actually looks. Note the ecological devastation and the dead trees. The trees are not dead because something bad has happened to the atmosphere or global warming or anything. They're dead because people keep chopping their limbs off for firewood. And even though they value the tree, they'll be so desperate for firewood, they'll chop one limb off it, and eventually the trees just get like that.
What about those rabbits up there?
Boy, I have no idea. You know, yes, something strange is going on in the rabbit picture, and I'm not sure I want to know. This is interesting. You don't see many, the one on the left, you don't see many local representations of street crime in their own country. I mean, usually it's beautiful hills and beautiful trees and frolicking natives. And this is somebody getting shot right on the street, which of course happens in Haiti entirely too often. I brought this mask back from West Africa just because I liked the way that it looked. But I was in this store with a lot of masks, and I was trying to figure out what the masks represented, or so that I would have some story for moments like this to tell about the mask. And I don't know, this mask didn't seem to have any particular purpose at all except to be a mask and to look nice. But there was another mask that I saw, and it was a very interesting mask. It was almost like a little too interesting. And I asked the young lady in the store, I said, what's this mask for? And she blushed a lot. And it was interesting. I guess I never really thought about it. She was very dark-skinned, and I didn't really realize that people who were that dark-skinned could blush that vividly. But I mean, she turned quite red. And she stammered, and I mean, her English was perfectly good. And she said, and finally she said, dancing at night. And kind of moving right along. Here we have the handsome antelope masks, which represent the antelope.
Civil War historian Shelby Foote authored several books, including his 3-volume Civil War series, The Beleaguered City, and Shiloh. He died in June of 2005 at the age of 88. In 2001, Book TV recorded an entire program from the late novelist's home in Memphis, Tennessee. Here is the first 25 minutes.
Born in Greenville, Mississippi, Shelby Foote's first novel, Tournament, was published in 1949 when he was 33 years old. He published 4 other novels in the 1950s. In the spring of 1954, Bennett Cerf of Random House asked him to write a brief account of the Civil War for the 100th anniversary of that conflict. 20 years later, in the spring of 1974, he completed The Civil War, a Narrative. Containing over 1 million words, the trilogy has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. From his home in Memphis, Tennessee, our guest on In Depth is novelist and historian Shelby Foote. Shelby Foote, when did you move into this house, and how much of your Civil War writings were done from here?
All 3 volumes were written in Memphis. We lived down on the bluff overlooking the river for the first volume. Then we moved out to what was then the eastern city limits. I wrote the second volume. Then we moved back to a midpoint right in the middle of Memphis for the third volume.
How many years have you lived here?
We've been in this house since '66, so you can do the arithmetic.
How much, and then what room are we standing in, and how much of the house plays in how you write and how you think?
Very much so, it always has. I've never been able to write away from home. My desk is where I do my work, and I don't write while I'm traveling or anything else. I have great admiration for writers like D.H. Lawrence and John Keats, who could write at any time, anywhere. But I could never do that always. If I take off 2 days, it'll take me 4 days to get back to work, and I have to be at my own desk. It's a laming thing.
Where are we in your house?
This is a sitting room adjoining my workroom here. The bedroom's on beyond it there.
You know, most of us got to know you in 1990 or thereabouts when Ken Burns did his Civil War epic of 11 episodes. Where were those interviews done?
They were done on this couch here, sitting right here in this room.
What impact did that whole series have on your life?
A tremendous impact. I had not realized the enormous power of television until that time. Not only to sell books, but people think you've been in their homes. They will call you up, call you by your first name, and said it was very nice to have you in their house last week. It's kind of strange, and it's somewhat startling.
How much in your life have you written?
You mean how long have I been writing?
No, how many, how many words, how many books?
The Civil War is 1.5 million words, and the rest of my writing is about that same amount. So I've written something over 2 million words.
How many books total?
There are 6 novels in the 3 volumes of the Civil War, and then recently some things I've been doing for the Modern Library, like a long essay on Chekhov, another on Stephen Crane, favorites of mine.
We opened up by saying you're from Greenville, Mississippi. How many years do you live in Mississippi?
I lived in Mississippi until I moved here. Except for school and the Army, I was always in Greenville for the first 40 years of my life.
What impact did Mississippi have on you?
A great impact. One thing that happened, I know everybody thinks they had either the worst possible childhood or the best possible childhood. I was raised in a town in the Mississippi Delta, Greenville, and there was a population then of about 15,000, which meant that every child in that town between the ages of, say, 13 and 17 was in that school. So you lived the rest of your lives with people you'd been to school with during an impressionable time of your life. And I got to know every type of person it could be. And in a town that size, one of your best friends can be the son of the president of the bank. The other best friend can be the son of almost anything. And it gets you to know, it's sort of like the Army in that regard. You get to know all kinds of people and know them well.
Just a short distance here, you can get on the bridge and drive to Arkansas. How far are we from Mississippi?
Mississippi is about 14 miles south of here. Memphis is the capital of the Mississippi Delta, even though it's outside it.
I found something on the web that I wanted to share with you. This was from, I'm not going to give the student's name because it might be a tad bit embarrassing, but it was a student, I believe, from Austin Peay State University in Tennessee. Have you heard about this?
No.
And she wrote an introduction and a biography about you.
Goodness.
But the last line of the opening says, Foote is a tremendous writer who served in the Civil War, and his writings come from his personal experiences.
I'm glad she got that impression. That's the impression I wanted to. I'm in that book, you see, I hope. And that's the way I think history should be written, as if you were living in that time. It's totally unfair to look at it from 150-odd years later and pass judgment on what those people did without knowing what their values were and what the laws were even. It's what causes an awful lot of misunderstanding, trying to apply a different set of standards to a different nation, really.
All right, you have how many books, do you think, in this house? And I know you got a bunch back here. I just want to ask you what's on that shelf.
Books up this way, books this way, books that way. I'd be guessing if I said around 8,000 books, perhaps.
What's on that shelf that's one of your favorites?
Well, I have a particular reason for having a favorite. They're all my favorites. But up on the next to top shelf there's a leather-bound, that's the New York edition of Henry James. It belonged to Walker Percy. On the right over there, on the third shelf from the top, is a limited edition Club Shakespeare. That was my favorite possession, and the James was perhaps Walker's favorite impression. And about 20 years ago we got to talking, and we agreed that whichever one of us died first, he would leave, Walker would leave me the James, or I would leave him the Shakespeare. And he lost the contest, and I won it. That's Walker's James, that he, while he was on his deathbed, he told his wife to make sure I got it.
How many years ago did Walker Percy die?
He died in 1990.
And that Shakespeare over there, have you read all that?
Oh, many times, I guess, yeah. Shakespeare, you can't read too much Shakespeare.
Why?
Because the beauty of the language and the skill with which he handles it. The language itself, Shakespeare. He hung the moon. When you get to talking about art in writing, Shakespeare is outside any calculations. And in music, it's Mozart. And you put those two people off to themselves, and then you talk about various other people, but they hung the moon.
We're going to go in your next room in here. What is it?
I'm sorry?
That room. What's that room?
Well, that's where I do my work. That's my work room. It always has been ever since we moved in. I had the desk built in, the bookshelves were built in.
Since 1967?
Yeah, 66. Mm-hmm.
Let's go in and see what we can find in here. Go ahead. Now, when you were writing, did you sleep in this room?
Seldom. Sometimes when I was very anxious to get to bed or get up in a hurry and I was working hard, I would sleep in here mostly, except right now.
Before we talk about anything, right on this bed is your life behind you.
It's very strange to see it laid out like that. I've never seen it that way before. I get the impression I somehow managed to swallow a cannonball. So it's very strange to see it all together there.
What's the first one over here, The Merchant of Bristol?
This is the first thing I ever published. A friend of mine at the newspaper in Greenville ran a linotype machine, so he did that for me. I bought the paper, the people put it together, and it's signed and numbered. There were, I think, 260 copies. And I charged $1.50 a piece for them. And the whole town was furious that I could put such a high price on such a junky little thing. It's worth a good deal of money now.
Now, Tournament was your first novel.
That's my first novel.
When did you start it? When did you finish it?
I started it, the first 2 years at Chapel Hill, I decided I'd had enough college and it was time for me to come home because I knew the war was coming. This is like 38 or 9. And I came home, and while I was waiting, I joined the Mississippi National Guard, and while I was waiting for us to be mobilized, I wrote Tournament. And I sent it to Will Percy's publisher, Knopf, and they read it and wrote to me and said they liked it very much, but they didn't think it would sell, and I would do best to go on and write my next novel. And they'd be happy to see that, but they thought this would give me a bad name with booksellers. So I put it away in a drawer. When I came back from the war 5 years later, I got it out and revised it and sent it off, and it was published by Dial Press.
And the main message in the book?
It's a study of how each of us is alone in this world. And it's a study of a man's rise and fall without his being able to answer that question. Chekhov, they say of him, he was not interested in the answers of questions, he was interested in stating the question well. I feel the same way about it.
How alone do you think you've been in your life?
It's hard to say. I don't know how to put time things. How do you mean, though?
Well, I mean, you say each man is alone. I mean, do you feel alone?
I think that each of us is alone. Being alone is something that you prize highly. To be alone is a good thing. But breaking out of it is something else. We are alone in strange times. You're most alone during nausea, for instance. You're also most alone, perhaps, during orgasm. This loneliness thing is a thing that can go on forever. They're little islands of quiet in the middle of the racket of a noise. It's a very strange business when you start examining how each man is alone.
And just a few months ago, you had a bout with cancer.
Right.
Colon cancer. What was that like?
You take medical things as they come, and you leave it up to the doctors to do something about it, and you do what the doctor says. I've had all kind of medical things since I turned 65. Lord, I've had a stent installed. I had one of the first balloon bypass heart things. And each one of those came along, and you just take it as that's the hand you drew at that time, and you leave it up to the doctors. And thank God I've had real good doctors, or I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here if they hadn't developed medicine as far as they have in the last 20 years.
Now, you're going to be 85 in November?
Right.
What's it feel like to be that age compared to when you started that first novel?
I can't associate myself with anybody 85 years old. It amazes me in the first place.
You still write?
Yeah, of course. I'll stop when they let me down. But nearly all my friends are dead. My closest friend, Walker Percy, has been dead for 11 years. It's hard to believe. But that's the way it goes. You take it as it comes, and you hope with some form of grace.
Now, you're married to Gwen, who's here today. How long have you been married to her?
Be 45 years in September.
What's that been like?
I can't imagine being married to anyone for 45 years. Or it's amazing, right?
The one thing that I want you to talk about, because we've talked about it before in interviews, is what's over here on this shelf.
Yeah.
Talking about time, remembrance of things past, Marcel Proust, and right here is the...
Proust is my favorite 20th century writer. Ever since my mother gave me this 4-volume Proust for my 17th birthday, and every time I feel I've earned the right to do it, I quit everything and reread Proust. I've done it in the back of this one. I wrote each time. There's the 9th reading in 1993. I haven't felt justified in taking off too much since 93.
So you've read this book, and it's what, 3,000 pages?
Yeah.
9 times.
Right. This
Why?
is 9th reading. It's 2 reasons. One is pure enjoyment. Proust is one of the most entrancing writers that ever lived. And the second, he can teach you something. You can always learn. A writer can learn from Proust. And he can indeed. We were talking about Shakespeare earlier. That's the grand master teacher.
When we stand over here so folks can see you better. What is it about the written word that's either attractive to people or it separates it from television?
I really think that the written word is what defines us as superior creatures to all the other creatures on earth. Man is characterized by a number of things. One of them is he's the only animal that knows he's going to die someday. And knowing that, he also has an obligation to make the most of whatever time he has. And making the most of it is enormously assisted by reading, by learning about the world, learning about the past and the present, and an ability to look to the future by reading.
I want to tell our audience, if you've just joined us, Shelby Foote will be with us for another 2 hours and 45 minutes. And in about 15 minutes, we'll go to the phones, give you a chance for 2.5 hours to ask him any questions you might like to ask him about anything, including all the writing that he's done. What else are your favorite things in this room?
Oh, Lord, that's a very large question, because I tend to put my favorite things back here.
We're going to talk about all that over there when we get into your seat over there. We got the music over here.
Got music over there, and modern literature mostly over here. Although it starts as all of Dickens, all of Conrad, Jane Austen. One of the best Faulkner collections in the country there.
Have you read it all?
Oh, yeah. And over again. What I appreciate more about reading is rereading. I'm a writer, it's my craft. And when you reread a book, especially by a real good writer, you enjoy seeing how he goes about getting where he's going, because you know where he's going when you reread, and you see him prepare for what's coming. And the skill with which he does that is enormously instructive to a writer.
When you read, what's the circumstances?
It's a funny thing. I've talked to people about their reading. I do not see a scene when I read. I read words and even punctuation. A lot of people, they tell me when they read, it's like looking at a movie. They see the characters and what the author is saying they're doing. And of course I do that to some extent, but mostly I'm looking at the way he moves words around.
I remember reading somewhere about you that back at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, you got lost in the 9 stories of stacks in the library?
I didn't get lost. I was very much happy to be there. I imitated a graduate student, and I would get in the cubicle and all this 9 stories of books. I'd never seen anything like that before. And to me, a university is a library with a group of buildings around it. And I spent more time in the library than I did anywhere, even the fraternity house, classroom. No matter, it was the library. I was just fascinated with finding it. Not only was there all of Shakespeare there was all the books about Shakespeare there.
What kind of music do you add to your life from over
here? 2 kinds. I'm crazy about classical music in every sense, and I'm also a big fan of the blues. Robert Johnson especially, but Bessie Smith, and a great many others.
We talked one time many years ago that when you listen to music, you don't read?
No. I can listen to music while I'm going to sleep, but it's a distraction. I can't put up with what I'm trying to read. I can't do both those things at once.
And so when you listen to music, you don't read. When you read, you don't listen to music.
That's right.
Before we sit down, a couple other things. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's go quickly through the process here. Follow Me Down, novel written what year?
That was written, it came out in 1950. This came out in 49, that in 50, 51, 52, 54, and that one in 75, I think.
Now, these novels are about what?
They're about the Mississippi Delta, possible exception of Shiloh, and there's one of the characters in there is from my home place.
We go up the next level here, and we have the 3-volume set of the Civil War.
Right.
All nonfiction.
Right.
I remember reading that you said you read 350 books to get ready to write that.
I had about 300 books that I actually worked with right over my desk. I didn't much go to libraries, and I did not go to original material in the Department of Archives and History. I wrote from the printed word. But the Civil War is so widely written about that you don't need to go back to the original documents. Everything, they've all been gone over.
Over here is the Shelby Foote and Walker Percy correspondence.
That's our letters. We never knew those would be in print, and that's one of the nicest things about them. We were talking to each other.
What about that friendship, and you know, how valuable was it to your life?
Well, we were friends for almost exactly 60 years. And I don't know how many people have a friendship that lasts 60 years, but I've never heard of 2 writers getting along for 60 years. So,
how did it start?
It started when Walker and his 2 brothers moved to Greenville. Will Percy, their cousin and adoptive father, came to me at the country club swimming. He came over and said these young people were coming to visit him, and he'd like for me to help show them around town and everything. I said I'd be glad to. And that's the way we met.
What was the best thing about Walker Percy?
The best thing about Walker Percy was Walker Percy. You had to know Walker to know what I mean by that, but anybody can appreciate him by his work. He's one of the great writers of the 20th century.
Won't we walk over near your desk? You have your friend Proust is over there above the bed.
That's my man.
Now, did you sleep in this bed while you were doing your work?
Quite often.
How many days in a row would you, when you worked on your last volume of the Civil War in this room, how many days would you work?
7 days a week.
Straight through?
Except time I go to New York or something, take off. But I found that skipping a day's work would cripple me up for coming back to work, so I didn't skip a day.
What was the longest stretch that you had during that time where you'd write?
You mean how many weeks I'd go without
a break?
schedule?
Yeah.
Oh, I might do that for 2 or 3 months.
Without a break?
Well, yeah, I'm a slow writer, so it took I had to work long hours to turn out. A 500 word day is a good day for me.
And you would not write more than 500-600 words a day?
That was a sort of average. I might take off like a skyrocket and write 1,200 words some day. Other days it might be 50 words. It's hard to say.
And this is the chair? This is where you sat? Somewhere I read also this light. It's an old light.
The first story I ever sold was to the Saturday Evening Post, and they paid me what was then an enormous sum of $750 for that story. And I bought 3 things. I bought this lamp, a shotgun, which is in the closet there, and a leather jacket, which is also in the closet. I still use all 3 of them.
On that desk there, you also use that dip pen we talked about before.
Right.
Show us the pen.
That's the kind that used to be in post offices. And finding points is an absolute nightmare. Finding blotters is a hard thing to do. And I don't know where there's a pen staff, but I don't worry about that. And I was lucky. I found a whole bunch of points at a dusty old stationery shop that used to be on 44th Street, just down from the Algonquin. And I bought myself a lifetime supply.
What kind of paper would you write on?
That is a big problem. I write on typewriter paper, and it doesn't take ink anymore the way it used to. So I have a big problem with paper.
Now what's this I have in my hand?
That's the manuscript of Shiloh. And at the end of each day, I do the final corrected draft and put it on the stack, and then type it up for the printer.
Is this the original or is this the copy?
That's a final day's copy. Each day I would do what I had done that day. I would end the day by making that final copy.
Now, you've got up on the shelf there, how many other of your original?
Oh, it says Tournament, Follow Me Down, Dry Season, Shiloh. Jordan County's not up here. I didn't save those, but there's September, my 6th novel.
You have any idea how valuable those are?
No.
What are you going to do with them?
Leave them to my son.
What about your work, I mean, your papers and stuff?
They're in the Southern Historical Collection at Chapel Hill. I'm glad they're there. It's a good place for them. It's a good collection.
And what are some of the things that you have there on the back of your desk?
Oh, Lord. They're favorites of mine. Chekhov, Keats, Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, myself as an old Confederate scout, a birthday party when I was about 11 years old in Greenville with all my friends, Bedford Forrest, Robert E. Lee, U.S. Grant, Pat Claiborne.
Somewhere I read where Pat Claiborne was one of your favorites.
Absolutely.
Who was he?
He's from Arkansas. He's an Irish immigrant who became a lawyer in Helena, and was interested in the military because he'd done a hitch in the British Army as a corporal. And he's a marvelous general, and his men loved him. He was killed at Franklin in the last year of the war.
Jake, could we get a really good close-up there on that board just so folks can see it not from such a distance? Why Chekhov? And you mentioned him even earlier.
Chekhov is he was born 4 years into this century, but he's as modern today as when he was writing. Chekhov had a tremendous influence on the writing of the short story. All short story writers are influenced for the good by Chekhov. Chekhov had a talent that's not, you can't explain it. Walker and I used to try to figure out how he does these things, how he brings them off. We could never figure how he did it. He's so good.
At this stage in your life, who do you enjoy reading the most?
Always Shakespeare and Proust.
Still.
Those are the standbys. There are others, John Keats, Robert Browning, in our time, Faulkner, Fitzgerald, and John O'Hara, who's practically disappeared now.
Harold Holzer is the author and editor of 23 books on Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War era. Earlier in his career, he served as a newspaper editor, a campaign press secretary, a government speechwriter, and as public affairs director for a PBS station, WNET. We visited the Lincoln Scholar's office at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, where he serves as vice president of public affairs, and we also visited his home in Rye, New York.
You do all of this in addition to your day job as a communications director, vice president for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. We have some pictures of your office and where you work. How do you juggle it?
Well, that's the doorway. Brand new office. We've just opened our new headquarters, and that's John Paul Conti, my executive assistant, supposedly guarding the door but letting you guys in. That's a painting on the wall by Tony Bennett, I should say.
The singer?
The singer, yeah. It's difficult. I mean, I do my Met work during the day, and I do my Lincoln work on the weekend. There's Sam Waterston and a visit to the White House right before 9/11. Mrs. Clinton visited the Met. That's Mario Cuomo's 70th birthday party. President Clinton was a visitor. So it's difficult. It's a very challenging job. I find that my relaxation comes on the weekend by writing. I do my reading all the time and at night, and I'm lucky to have the library I need at home, and with the World Wide Web, it sort of cuts down on the need for research trips. But as my wife Edith says, almost every vacation we've had in 20 years has been Lincoln-related, research-related. So we visited Springfield, and as often as people like to go to London. I mean, we do Lincoln sites.
We'll continue our conversation with Harold Holzer, but first we'll travel to New York and show you some of the work habits of our guest as we continue on Book TV.
Well, a typical working day here is after breakfast, I come up to what has been my work area for 20 years, this corner of our bedroom, and turn on some kind of a videotape to keep out the noises, or if it's a different time of day, a baseball game, and turn on the computer and get to work with whatever I have on my plate, whether it's a talk that I have to give somewhere, or a chapter in a book, or an article, and I just get to it. I break for a salad lunch, and I run back upstairs and sort of work through dinner, offering absolutely no help around the house, and no company for my family, which they seem to be getting used to, or are happily used to. So it's all day and into the evening, every day of the weekend.
So your primary writing is done on the weekends, not during the week?
Oh no, all of the writing is done on the weekend. The only writing I do during the week that's not related to my work at the Metropolitan Museum is if an idea occurs to me, I'll write something down on a pad, and by the time I get home on the weekend, I have 30 scraps of paper. So actually the first thing I do when I get home on Fridays is to go through all of the work things I have from the Met, work on memos and unanswered correspondence, things I have to prepare for the next week. I do all of that first. And then I go to the scraps of paper that I've accumulated during the week and see if I can make some sense out of those in terms of how I'm supposed to fold it into my beautifully connected files here, which are supposed to lead me to the next project seamlessly.
How many of your books have been produced here in this room, roughly?
I would say all 23.
The files and material you have here, does this change with each book, or does it sort of shuffle through over time?
Believe it or not, now my wife Edith is going to kill me for showing this, but this is a card table that we used to use as an extra table for when we had a big dinner. So when I sort of grew out here and things kept expanding, I took pieces. This piece, which I keep, I use for microfilm reels of the Abraham Lincoln papers. All of the correspondence that came into the White House during the Lincoln presidency. I have most of the reels now, and I have a microfilm reader in the basement. That I've been banned from having here. I actually had it here once, but it's huge, and that was the end, that was the limit. So that was banished. I also keep copies of my books right here in case I want to refer to something quickly. But this little unit was the bookcase that my mother and father bought for me when I was about 15, and it stood on top of a dresser as my one and only shelf unit. So I've kept it because it's, you know, it's wood and it's sturdy, and I can use it, still use it. That desk we picked up at an antique shop, and I keep some things there, contracts, extra supplies. So basically I know where everything is, but this bridge table remains my chief filing system, aside from a couple of file cabinets in the closet.
Harold Holzer, your latest book, Lincoln at Cooper Union, the speech that made Abraham Lincoln president. As we look at you in your home office, there's nothing fancy about that place.
It's embarrassing, isn't it? But we're working on a new den. Edith is focusing on helping me build the den that I just keep feeling that if I'm out of the environment that I've been working in, I'm not going to be able to get any work done. But we'll see. Yeah, I like to be contained. I like to have all the books around me and feel very cluttered. It's probably a psychological disorder of some kind, but that's the way I work best.
Taylor Branch was our guest on In Depth in February of 2006. Mr. Branch labored over 20 years on a trilogy of books about Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. The series is entitled America in the King Years. From the beginning, Mr. Branch used a computer filing system to organize his extensive interview transcripts and research material. In this segment, we get a detailed description of his methods.
A typical day on the King Project has to begin at 5 a.m. Over a habit of many years, which means I get up at 5, I go down, I make a cup of coffee, I put it in the machine, I take the dogs out, and by the time the dogs get back in, the coffee is made. I pick up the coffee and I'm up here about 5:03 or 04. So I have a very short commute, so I'm up here with coffee in the morning, so I start early. I've just found writers have all different kinds of habits, but I found that because I'm trying to draw material from so many different sources, that if I don't get that early start, kind of stewing and concentrating and trying to bring things together, I tend not to have a productive day. If I come up after breakfast at 8 o'clock, by the time I get things together and fight through intervening phone calls or something like that, it's lunchtime and I start to lose hope for a productive day. But if I do start early at 5, which I did virtually 90% of the time over all the 20 years, I tend at least to start and get a little momentum before 7 o'clock when I go down to say goodbye to my wife off to work or whatever and have a little breakfast, so that when I come back I've already got some momentum for the day. In the old days, sometimes I could go on into the night, you know, and occasionally when I was really in a rush, because I find that there's a rhythm in a chapter. The chapter starts slowly, more slowly when I'm trying to organize and get started on an approach into a subject, and then there tends to be a rush when I feel that I've got it going and got some narrative momentum toward whatever kind of conclusion there is for the chapter. And sometimes in the old days I would write all night, you know, go around the clock. But now for the last, at least for this volume, I haven't been able to do that. You know, I write until breakfast, take a short break, write until lunch, still take a short break, and I give out around 4 in the afternoon. That's still a pretty long writing day by writing standards, but it's not what I used to be able to do. For all these different sources, because in the files there would be FBI documents, documents from the King Library, documents from the presidential libraries, documents from a host of other specialized libraries like the Peace Collection at Swarthmore Library on the Vietnam era. Those would be intermingled in the files, and the only way that I could correlate them with things that were in books or on tapes or that sort of things I had was that I had a note card system on the computer. So this is Microsoft Access, which has it on there. The main, there are several files I use for the book. Biblio is the bibliography, which basically keeps track of all the books that were used in there. I had a coded system to keep track of them. You'll see the code is over here. Code, so that book number 1, which I entered back in the early 80s, was White Over Black, Winthrop Jordan's kind of history of race in America. And so this code goes all the way down to, I guess the last book I entered was book number 1088, Our Times, The Illustrated History of the 20th Century, book on James Madison, Race Law, My Lai 4, King Came Preaching, Tet. And those are, you know, books number 1077. But basically this is just kind of the list of the books that I consulted or referred to in the book. But anyway, that's one file, is the bibliography file, but the main one is the research file, which is right here, research. And it automatically put each one of these going this way is a note card, and this is pretty odd because it's year, month, and day, and it puts it in chronological order automatically, and it starts with 960 BCE. Solomon completes the first temple. That comes from book number 438. I don't know what it was, it's page 99, but this is some material on the Hebrew prophets. But of course, as the movement, as the movement itself rises into public attention, later in the 1950s, it's more common that you'll get more than one note on the same day. Here, for example, October 29th, 1956, there's a universal newsreel which came from the National Archives. In fact, I guess 3 of these are from there. And BUK is the Boston University King Files, Box 10, Folder 13. A memo saying basically the Dexter Echo, which is King's church newsletter, reports that Coretta was presented in recital at Olivet Baptist Church in Chicago, which was the church of Dr. King's later nemesis, Joseph H. Jackson. So things like that. It begins to get much more concentrated as the movement rises into national attention, but there's something from almost every day. And when you get back, I think that's, you know, record number I'm not sure what it is. Oh, I went backwards. There's 17,079 records in here, and you know, most of them are post-1960, and generally speaking, it gets more and more concentrated through the 60s. I mean, here's February 21st, it just stopped there, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 records for that day. Of course, that's the day, you know, Malcolm X is shot, so there would be a lot. But there are some here that don't have anything to do with Malcolm X on that same day. And so as you're getting into Selma, here's February 26th, 5 days later, and it goes all the way down to the bottom of the screen. The computer note card file was kind of it was kind of an intersection to help try to manage the material, because what I'm trying to do is pick a narrative course through here that will deliver the most, the best picture to a reader of what was going on at the time, not segregating, but bringing together the different fields of civil rights and Vietnam and the White House and the FBI and
In March of 2006, our guest was Johns Hopkins University professor Francis Fukuyama. He is the author of The End of History, America at the Crossroads, and Our Post-Human Future. In his spare time, Francis Fukuyama makes furniture and takes photographs. In the next segment, he discusses his writing habits, and we also visited his home to learn about his hobbies.
So it's, you guys are moving to 4. So if it's 4, it's okay. Okay. But if it's still 4, 9 to 4, and then say they need a PowerPoint projector.
When you're in the process of writing a book, what is a typical day like for you, if there is such a thing?
Well, you know, that's changed over the years. When I first wrote The End of History and then my second book, Trust, I didn't have a teaching position at that time, and I was pretty much working full-time on the book. And so I had this very methodical method. I took the number of words I needed, I figured out how many days I had to write it, and I divided one by the other. And I came up, I didn't do it by words, I did it by computer bytes, and I said, okay, I have to write 5,000 bytes, you know, Monday through Friday, and do this for 6 months. And so I had a pretty regular schedule. The last 2 or 3 books have been completely chaotic because I've been a professor, I teach, I travel, I give 50, 60 lectures and speeches and go to conferences and this sort of thing. And so now I kind of cram the writing into whatever space is available before classes. I get up pretty early in the morning, sometimes I do it then, I do it on airplanes, I do it sitting on my kitchen table early Saturday morning before my kids are up. You know, I do it waiting in the car, you know, at soccer games, you know, this sort of thing.
How much of it do you do right here in your office?
I end up doing a fair amount. I'm directing a program in international development right now, and I actually, you know, it's good to show up and have people know that you're actually present at the school. And so I'm here a fair amount, and I end up doing a certain amount of writing here. And a lot of it is just meeting deadlines. You know, the publisher says, oh, we have to get the next version in by, you know, the end of next week, and so I just find the time to do it whenever I can.
What about your research and material that you might need for research? How do you handle that?
Well, that's actually the fun part of writing a book, is actually having to read something and teach yourself. And I've really tried to use each book as an excuse to learn something about an area that I didn't really know that much about previously. Of course, being a tenured professor, you have a lot of people around you that can help with that, called doctoral students who do, and actually, I hate to say it, but I haven't been in a library stack looking for books myself for a very long period of time. But I do, you know, I mean, the process of doing research is a process of discovery. So you read one book and you read the footnotes, and that takes you to another set of books, and then that suddenly opens up another world that you hadn't realized was there. And I have, you know, I have students to help me get materials and find materials and suggest materials, and that's often, you know, I learn as much from my students as I suspect they learn from me. But it's a, so it's a kind of complicated iterative process where you just start on this search and you don't really know where it's going to lead you to, but you just read one book and that leads you to another one.
Do you have any filing system that you can keep over the years where you can go back and access certain things that you want to use again?
I am I'm pretty good with computers. I started a database when I was just out of graduate school. I had a K-Pro computer. This was even before the IBM PC. I put all of the bibliography of my doctoral dissertation in a DBase 2 file, and it evolved into a Paradox file. Now it's a Microsoft Access file. It's got about 13,000 records, so literally everything I've ever read in my life is in this one database, and I can call up almost anything that I've read, and it just spits out the bibliography when I'm ready at that point in the book. And the other thing is I also keep almost everything I've written in a single directory on a computer. It's now backed up a zillion ways because I really am terrified of losing all of that. And with computers you can search for individual words, and you remember something that you've written a long time ago, or you remember a reference that's in a footnote to something that you wrote back in the mid-1990s, and the computer will just pull that up. And I actually try to teach that to my students because if you're writing a doctoral dissertation, that's a really good point to start organizing what you read and what you learn in a really systematic way, so that 15 years down the road, when you suddenly remember, oh yeah, when I was in graduate school, I remember reading that great article that really explained that, and I didn't realize how it was relevant back then, but now I do. You need a way of recalling what that was.
What about at home? Do you do a lot of writing at home, and how much would that sort of compare to what you do here?
I don't think I've got a pattern right now because I've got a lot of family obligations, and my time is as cut up at home as it is then, and I have been gradually pushed out of every space in the house that I thought was exclusively mine over the years by other members of the family, and so I kind of try to catch whatever opportunity to write whenever I can kick my kids off of one of our computers.
This is a piece of furniture that you've made?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell the story of how you made this?
Well, this is an absolutely classic Federal Pembroke table. The design of these things was really set in the late 18th century, so there's no creativity involved. But it came from a walnut tree that fell down in my backyard about 10 years ago. And being a cabinet maker, there was a big opportunity. So I took the walnut tree, I cut it up with a chainsaw, which is a really messy job if you've ever tried to cut a tree into boards by that method. And it took 2 years for the boards to dry, 1 year outdoors and 1 year indoors, and then I milled them into planks, and I designed using AutoCAD the table on the computer and came up with blueprints. And at that time I had a really nice shop set up in my basement, and so I in the course of, I would say, it probably took a good year of woodworking, but I did all the inlay. I did not actually create that inlay in the middle of the table. You buy those, but you have to route out a place for them and all of the banding and so forth. And if you notice, one important detail, which probably only a woodworker will see, is on the side of the drawers. The dovetails are all hand dovetailed. You cannot do that on a machine. You can't get those narrow pins, and so that's all cut out with a chisel and a very fine saw.
What got you started in making furniture?
Well, it was actually when I was in the State Department in the early 1980s, working for, when George Shultz became Secretary of State. I would go up to the Secretary's suite on the top floor of the State Department, and it's just beautifully furnished with federal, mostly federal period, late 1800s furniture. And I always admired that, and I knew that I would never be able to afford any of that furniture just buying it on my own, so I figured, well, let's figure out how to make it yourself. So I just in the course of a few years, taught myself what was necessary to make a reproduction. So it's not creative at all. As I said, the design of a Pembroke table is absolutely fixed. The height and the ellipse and everything, the dimensions are all very well established, and so you just get those out of a book. But the execution is, is the, I guess, the real craft of it.
Here's another piece that you made.
Yes, this is another classical federal card table. This is not from a tree from my own yard, but it is a very nice North American walnut, and it's a table that was used in colonial days. It's got a gate leg, and people would play whist or whatever sitting around it. But again, the difficult thing, it's completely nerve-wracking to do a curved inlay like that because you do it with a router, and you know that if your hand slips, that entire piece of wood is no good and you've got to start all over again. So that's, I think that's really the skill involved. But and once again, these kinds of card tables, you see them quite a lot in colonial houses and well-to-do colonial houses. The design was something that was very well established by the late 18th century.
Do you know anybody else who just decided to teach themselves how to make these and learn them, or you belong to any clubs or anything, or is this just something you decided to do?
You can do it, and you buy videos, and there's a lot of guys that teach themselves how to remake automobiles and federal card tables. So I don't think it's that big an accomplishment.
But had you done any woodworking before?
Not really, not really. Yeah, no, you got to learn a few tricks in order to avoid losing a thumb, because it can get a little tricky with all the power tools. Okay.
So you're also interested in photography?
Well, that's actually been a much more long-standing hobby of mine that I started when I was a kid, and I gave it up for about maybe 15, 20 years, but then the digital age hit, and I've been doing it now, I think, for about 10. I travel a lot, so I always take a camera wherever I go, but I got interested in, being able to control lighting and doing more studio-type work, and so I've now gotten set up. I have this annual ritual with my kids. I do a portrait of them every New Year's so that we have a very clear record of what they look like at yearly intervals. And one of these days I would like to take pictures of all of my friends because I know some pretty interesting people and get them to pose like Avedon in front of my camera, but unfortunately I've been a little too busy to do that.
Is this where you do your portrait work, right here?
Yeah, it's just a basement, but I can set it up with all of my lights to do portraits.
What kind of camera is this?
I love this camera. It is a Mamiya RZ67. It's a medium format. It produces a big 6x7 centimeter negative. It's bigger than a Hasselblad, and it just produces the most beautiful high-resolution pictures that I then scan into the computer. It produces about a 500 megabyte scan when you're done with it. And I've taken this all the way to Australia. It's not an easy camera to use, but it's incredibly flexible, and it produces really beautiful pictures.
How long have you been using this camera?
I think I've had it about 4 years now. I've also got another medium format Mamiya that is a little bit lighter than that I use for travel photography. But and then I've got a collection of Nikons and other things. I'm afraid the digital revolution is finally going to make these cameras obsolete because the resolution that you can get now on a pro digital SLR is getting up to this level. But I'm going to be very sad because the films that they make for medium format cameras are just beautiful. Just at the moment that they've perfected it, all of that's going to end.
How does the processing work? You just get a negative and then you manipulate the digital?
Yeah, I scan it. I've got a medium format scanner, and so I scan either a slide or a negative into my computer, and then it's all photoshopped from there. I used to have a wet darkroom when I was a kid, and I did black and white. In fact, I even did color darkroom work for a while, but the computer makes that so much easier these days. it's kind of, you feel kind of bad, all these skills that people develop to, you know, darkroom skills like Ansel Adams. There's one print that Ansel Adams printed repeatedly, and it took him 25 years to finally get the print that he felt happy with. And unfortunately, you know, it's easier. All of that effort and you know, that craftsmanship is, you lose when you move to computers and digital.
What is it about the woodworking and then the craftsmanship of the photography? Why are you attracted to those things?
Well, okay, the woodworking, I know exactly why. I mean, I am an intellectual, right? I write books. I do all of this stuff that yields no tangible product. And so what I really loved about woodworking is, okay, you make a table or you make a chair. I made beds for all of my kids, and my kids, you know, grew up sleeping on beds that I made. And that's very satisfying because you can say, well, what do you do? What did you do with your life? Well, you know, you produce this table that you could now eat at or sit at or whatnot. The photography is a little bit different. I'm not an artistic person at heart. I'm more analytical, and so I never think of myself as being, you know, particularly creative. And what I like about photography is actually the realism of it, that someone actually saw what you're seeing in the photograph. That's what's threatened by Photoshop, because of course now you can get all these pictures that aren't really what people actually saw. But you know, all these great photographers like Robert Capa, you know, you look at his pictures and you say, my God, I can't believe that someone actually witnessed all of these different things, the Spanish Civil War and the liberation of Paris and you know, the Chinese Revolution in the way that he saw them. And so it's something where you can do something that's beautiful, but it's not, you know, it's not completely under your control. And I guess that's what I like about it. And again, it's more of a craft in my view than an art.
In Depth airs live at noon Eastern on the first Sunday of each month on Book TV on C-SPAN 2. Log on to booktv.org for information about upcoming guests.
Coming up this weekend on Book TV, Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern.